Okay, it's recording.
Right. Hopefully it can be edited.
Yeah, it can be edited. It can be edited.
I did
So,
a I did a series of TV commercials years ago for Meet Clark,
yeah,
and man, dude, I wasn't meant to be in front of a camera, but through the miracle of editing,
yeah,
they came out really really good because they could cut out all my embarrassing moments of laughter and screwing up and
yeah.
make it into one cohesive interview. So they came out pretty good.
Well, it's the same with Gonzo Pilgrimage, like the amount of bloopers and just like, mush mouth gibberish that that
Yeah.
happens. It's unbelievable. But yeah, no worries. We'll edit, especially if I stand up. People will see I'm not wearing pants, so then we have to cut that out. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. So,
Screenshots, blackmail.
yeah, blackmail. Yeah. So yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for doing this. I know that it's a weird position to be in, and it's kind of weird to then like talk about the spirituality in the face of everything that's going on. But I think for starters, just so that everybody's brought up to speed, what's been going on? Like, what was your official diagnosis? And yeah, just in brief, like, what's been going on and what have you been through in these last few months?
Well, it's actually now I'm almost a year and a half in, close. So November of 24, is it 24 now? Yes. Um, I started experiencing significant back pain, unlike anything I'd ever had before where I'd been hurt, which, um, that's been a lifelong thing. Play hard, get hurt.
Yeah.
And, but this was unique and weird, and it intensified and got worse and worse and worse. So I sought, I went to all the normal routes, went to the doctor, went to, you know, Caleb saw me and he's like, hey, dude, this is something serious. And so went through the medical route, got referred to get an MRI through an orthopedic surgeon and also GP, and um, got denied by my insurance company 3 times. And I have supposedly I had great insurance. Um, and so my problem got worse and worse and worse, right to the point where I was having trouble driving to work. Had to get out and walk and that sort of thing. Anyway, that led to an ER visit. I was told there that they don't do MRIs in ER, and they kind of just sent me home. About 1 week later, I was attempting to drive to work, and it got so intense. Um, anyway, I'm trying to remember how it all went. Bottom line is, started with back pain. That ultimately was discovered through I was told that I had to do 6 weeks of conservative care, and it was in the process of that conservative care that I went to a pain management doctor, which was just a bogus thing. But that lady said, "Hey, you got something going on with your liver." So the next day, my doctor called after a blood test and said, "Get to ER as fast as you can. They're waiting for you. Your liver's shutting down." So then went to ER, spent 10 hours on a gurney in a hallway. Ultimately was given the MRI at ER, which so proved the other thing was a lie. And the ER doctor came out, put his hand on my knee, couldn't look me in the eye, and he said, "I'm super, super sorry, but you have pancreatic cancer." That was December 19th of 2024. I came home. Your mom was, and they discharged me, but told me that I had to have an emergency procedure within days or I was dead. That was the beginning of the journey, discovering that I had a significant pancreatic tumor, and went from being super, super healthy and active, running a business with 60 people and doing everything with all the grandkids and surfing really hard, big waves stuff. Still racing, actively racing my bike in multiple disciplines, mountain biking, cyclocross, road racing, to all of a sudden I'm a day or two from death. And so it was a big wake up call, obviously. It was a tearful night that night when I came home from the hospital. It really freaked your mom out. But I was admitted into the Sutter. I had the emergency surgery. They tried this ERCP, which was a fail. That then led to this emergency procedure. Um, it's informally called a Whipple, and a Whipple is, in short, it's a completely replumbing the entire digestive system. So I had, to the best of my recollection, most of my pancreas removed with the tumor, um, my entire gallbladder removed, the upper intestine, part of my stomach, duodenum, and at least 18 lymph nodes taken out. When they do all that stuff, all the vascular system and the routing that your normal digestive tract takes, obviously it goes from here to here to here, um, has to be reconnected somewhere else. So literally, um, tubes and things are rerouted to different parts of your system.
So they're just
Um,
reconstructing your intestines.
yeah. So the entire digestive tract gets rerouted, reassigned. And I would classify the surgical procedure as tremendous success. I felt really in good hands there with the surgical team, etc. The hospital side of things is an entirely different matter. It's a broken healthcare system, and I assume it's that way most over the world. So I finally made it out of the hospital. Chelsea brought me home. I was pretty weak, but happy to be home. And I was only home for 6 days with a pile of medications, of which the most critical medication that I needed was um, they forgot to order it. And so uh, it was a gigantic fail that led to basically within 6 days of being at home, I went into renal failure. Keep in mind, all of this is happening to a person who had otherwise been extremely healthy and active. So this was such a shock to be confronted with all of this. And I'm like, I mean, I've never been really in the hospital other than for injuries, getting
Yeah.
stitched up or casts put on or bones set, whatever. And so, yeah, it was a real stunner. Then they took me by ambulance about 8:30 on a one evening back to San Francisco because I was failing in Santa Rosa. I got stuck back in the Sutter down there for a few weeks. All told, I was in the hospital for about, I think it was 31 days, your mom said. I'm really fortunate, Ben, and you know this, but for the sake of the interview, I grew up, my dad was a veterinarian, and in those days, veterinary medicine wasn't like modern healthcare. Veterinarians practice a lot of their medicine in the field with large animals. So I, as a child, grew up with my dad as his right hand assistant.
Mhm.
Literally, I can remember or recall being as young as 5, and he would wake me up in the middle of the night, and we would go out and sew up sheep or whatever needed to be done. Sometimes we'd end up in the clinic, dog hit by a car, etc. And I was scrubbed for surgery, and um, so I grew up with this. And then through the horse stuff, I ended up having to learn I could start IVs by the time I was about 12. And just had this real hands-on experience with the medical system. And again, it just gave me the ability to process what I was being told and understand what was bullshit
Mhm.
and what was speculative and what was probably, medically accurate. And so, which is a beautiful thing because what it led to is a breakdown in confidence. And I understood that my answers didn't lie there. In essence, I began to understand that I was, I was probably not going to make it if I stayed there. And as you and I've talked about many times, again, for the sake of this, is that um, I've been grounded in a faith for since I was 22 years old that is probably, and as best described as very non-traditional. Um, it would appear outwardly to most people that I'm a religious person or I'm a Christian or put me into a categorical thing. I would not claim any of those things, but that I would claim that I have had a personal experience with the living God through the salvation of Jesus Christ. And so Um, and it's been part of my life my whole life. And I can say that it's been like all humans. I've ridden the ebbs and flows or the peaks and valleys of that. At times it's been high priority in my life, and at times, and I don't say ashamed to say this, but you the cares of this world enter in, and it chokes out some of one's spirituality when you're trying to raise a family, pay the bills, run a business,
Yeah.
things, and the cares of this world too, the pleasures, whether it be surfing or hedonistic things where we derive tremendous pleasure, racing a bike for hundreds of miles. You get caught up in a
Cigars
lot
and
of stuff,
whiskey.
and so yeah, and so you get caught up in things that pull you away from what should be a priority and a focus for somebody who's had this experience. I would say I don't. I regret not having had sometimes a closer walk, but I don't. I can't change those things, and God knew it anyway. He knows us. He created us for His workmanship, and so I don't. I'm not ashamed of that. And He and I talk about it all the time. And so when I read scripture, when I read about every great man or woman in the Bible and their tremendous stories, they're all such extremely flawed human beings. And that gives me the grace to understand that God doesn't um, hold those things against us. He understands our being, and He understands the state we walk in. And so, anyway, back to the what led me to when I'm laying there knowing that I'm essentially dying and having had to confront this mortality. Obviously it took me right back to the in the very, very beginning was, I was like, okay, well, we're not guaranteed a certain amount of days. All living cells, all living creatures, all every form of life that's has any life to it is going to die. That's just a
Yeah.
guarantee. And so I immediately was drawn to that. Like, yes, of course I'm, going to die. We all are. We're all terminal. And so reconciling that, finding peace with it almost immediately, not through anything of my own. People said, "Man, you're so strong," or these things. I've heard all these things, and it's really rather absurd to me. No, I'm not strong. I'm finding this gift from God each time He's handing me these graceful moments to understand this. So while laying in the hospital at 3:30 in the morning, wide awake, watching that 1 second tick
Yeah.
on the clock
Yeah.
straight across from you, which should not be in a hospital room. Um,
Yeah. It's brutal.
I was laying there and I was talking to God. And people call it praying or whatever. Uh, I think when you get right down to it, having real candid and casual conversation, prayers are not in the old English or King James version for me. Um, hey God, I'm feeling pretty shitty right now. Just these real, just just like you and I are talking, and like
Yeah.
we've always talked.
Yeah.
And so at 3:30 that morning, and I can't tell you what day of the week it was or anything, and it was after a day of tremendous frustration with the medical team and just wanting to be home. I was beat down to the point where I was like, okay. And I said, hey God, I can accept that I'm going to die, and I know I'm close, and I have total peace. You're my savior. I know where I'm going, but man, I'm not asking you to heal me, but I am asking if I could just go home. I just want to go home, and I want to be with my wife. And as I've shared with you already, sometime between whatever it was, 3:33 and 3:38, while in this conversation with God, I had the most overwhelming peace come over me that I've experienced only maybe once or twice in my life like that. And there is a verse or a scripture. And again, I don't have to quote it verbatim because it's the general connection, but it's in Philippians, and I think it's chapter 4, something, but it says in the old King James, to the best of my ability to quote it, uh, you know, in all, let's see, in all things, present your requests and supplications, your prayers and requests to God, and His peace, which will guard your heart and mind, will. I should go look it up. 4:6. Bunch of versions here. Do
Yeah.
not be anxious about anything, but every situation by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And then it goes on from there to, he talks about the peace that passes all understanding. And so I fully experienced that peace while laying there. And at 4 o'clock, my night nurse came in. Cool guy named Sam. I'd had him before. And I shared with him that experience, and he was kind of tripping on that, of course. 4 in the morning, I actually scared him. I'm like, Sam, I got to tell you this. So the conversation that ensued at that moment was, I said, Sam, I'm not going to put this on you in the middle of the night, but I'm going home. And he said, no, you're not.
Okay. So last I heard, you said
Yeah.
you told him I'm going home, and he said, "No, you're not."
Yeah. So, he's a nurse. It's in the middle of the night, middle of the morning. And so I said, look, at shift change, I'd like you to bring the day nurse in. Hopefully it's somebody that knows me and understands me. Because we're going to have a very, very candid conversation that I'm going home. And he said, no, you can't. And we had a little conversation, and I said, again, I'm not going to put this on you in the middle of the night, but there's a patient's bill of rights, and that means I'm in charge of me, and I'm going to exercise that right. And so change of shift. He brings the day nurse in. Unfortunately, she didn't know me. I'd never had her. So I explained to her that while you may not understand this, I've had a conversation with my creator, my savior, and I'm going home. And there's nothing more that you can do for me here. And I'm at peace with that. And you've all done a wonderful job. But I'm going to exercise my. And she was like, no. And she was going to go. And I said, look, I'm not going to cut you off. And I don't intend to be rude or disrespectful. But I have a background as such that I'm able to remove these IVs. I can start them. I can remove them. I know how to deflate this Foley catheter. I know how to. I'm going to take. And I'll even, in fact, take this drain out, or I'll leave with it. But I am going home today, with or without permission. I will sign a waiver. I will sign, you know, I'm not going to put this on anybody, um, but I'd like everybody's cooperation. And, you know, obviously that's not what they want to hear. And to their credit, they're supposed to be trying to save you. And in essence, they felt they were sending me home to die the next day type thing.
Well, and they
Surgical
might be
team
afraid
member,
because they don't know
liability.
the familiarity that you have with these things, and I'm sure they
Yeah,
deal with people all the
liability.
time,
And
that are risking their own lives doing that.
yeah, yeah. So, one of the surgical team members, Dr. Ward, came stomping in at about 10 o'clock, and he was clearly miffed. And
Yeah,
he said, so you want to go home? And, I said, yeah. I said, look, no disrespect. And I was very, very polite and cordial with him, but kind of reiterated my position. And so they weren't left with an option or a choice, because I told them I would just get up and take everything out, put my clothes on, and call an Uber or whatever.
yeah,
Uh, anyway, I called your mom. I was really excited. Between 4 and 5, when I knew she'd be up by 5, I wanted to call her immediately, but I waited until about 5. But then I called her and I said, baby, I have such incredible news. She goes, what? I go, I'm coming home. Shocked her, right? She's like, what? What changed? They said you couldn't. I said, it's not their decision. It's mine. I told her what happened. And I said, look, I don't even know what to say. I think I might be healed. She's like, what? I mean, it was that radical of a uplift. It wasn't all of a sudden that I was changed physically. I was still laying there 139 pounds from 100, almost 170 probably went going in.
yeah,
And or at the very least 165. When I was super fit racing my bike and doing really, really good, I was about 165. So put it in perspective. So it's not like I stood up, picked up my pallet and walked. to, to be a biblical reference or anything. But I did feel an internal transformation. And that peace was really, really guarding my heart and my mind. So I was making a rational decision to come home, not a emotional one.
Yeah.
And so your mom made arrangements, said she would get off and come down as soon as they were ready to get rid of me, and came home that day, Ben. And it was a journey upward. It was a very, very hard struggle. Oh, even though I requested that everything come out, drain and all, even though they were saying the output was too much, and took everything out. So I came home with nothing in me, and it was the right move. I, as you know, it was a months long journey of steadily working my way up. I was extremely weak and tired, but it was just such a beautiful, beautiful process to feel myself getting a little stronger each day, and ultimately, being able to go from walking to the end of my driveway to the end of the street to getting on my mountain bike and riding to the end of the street, and
Yeah.
then to making it almost to Shiloh and coming home, and then making it to Shiloh, and then making it up a little bit of
Yeah.
each day was these steady steps of God's grace and allowing me to, and that led to, bigger and better things. Obviously, you coming to visit and being able to kayak with you and hike with you. And, then I started surfing again. And that led to even surfing, by October, I was surfing, 18, maybe bigger foot waves, which is for anybody who can't even imagine getting hit by a 2 foot wave and held down and rolled around in the surf to get hit by a 20-foot wave or,
Yeah.
whatever. It's so demanding physically. And by then too, I'd ridden up to 65 miles on my bike, and, with a lot of climbing and doing huge strenuous, getting back to doing the bike races as a marshal, and, mountain bike races and camping, and, just life resumed. And most importantly, it was being surrounded by the love of, you guys, family, kids, Gene, returning back to some sense of normalcy with peers, and going out and riding with guys that, I used to smoke them,
Yeah.
have to, and then being on the, oh boy, I'm barely keeping up with them, kind of thing, but being there,
Yeah.
So, what a phenomenal, phenomenal gift. And
Yeah.
it's also been a year of not just blessing physically, because that really doesn't matter. It's been the greatest blessing spiritually for me that one could ever, ever hope for. And truly an astounding gift from um, God is so vast and so huge, and we can only comprehend this tiny little part. But that part has been magnified 10 to 1,000 times, sometimes just on a daily basis. Um, and it's been a beautiful blessing. And so I would not trade my current state. I wouldn't trade the diagnosis, the prognosis. I wouldn't trade the physiology. The fact that I guess we should recap this. In July, I took a CAT scan. I was doing all these regular blood draws and, all the stuff that, you're supposed to do. Um, Nothing was really looking great ever,
Yeah.
in spite of how good I was doing. The signs were all there that, you know, they'd gotten me through this immediate sense of being terminal, but that really actually we just prolonged things a little bit.
Yeah.
So I was asked to have a CAT scan in July. I got the results. I always go online and look up all the results before the doctor even gives me a call. So I read everything and I went, oh, doesn't look good. That led to a surgical consultation, and he wanted a PET scan. Why they don't just jump to the PET scan? Obviously, that's pretty stupid. But we did the PET scan, and it was quite conclusive that I had cancer everywhere. And so, we cut out a little bit of we cut some stuff out and gave me some time. But that And I've always laughed because cancer is it's cellular. And while we've made great strides with some cancers, there are a handful of cancers that they've made zero strides from, and I fall into that categorically. Pancreatic cancer is not a curable cancer. It's not classified as one. Survival's measured in months, not years. And I was told that through the oncology team. Um, so, um, so the PET scan revealed that it was everywhere, back all over my lymph, in my liver, and various, probably in the kidneys, et cetera. I can't, So I just said, hey, so understanding that, knowing, having read the whole PET scan results before I had the surgical consultation, I said, look, I get it, but in your best estimate, how much time do I have? And the guy said, uh, maybe 6 months. Okay, great. So that was in September of last year. So
Right.
I'm technically now exceeded my expiration date, which I'm stoked to say.
Yeah, at the time of
Not
this
just,
recording, this is today is April 2nd, and I still
yeah,
remember when you and mom had reached out and told me, well, it looks like six
yep,
to 9 months,
yeah,
and and
yeah.
you referenced me coming to visit, and we both agreed with, I think, maybe a little bit of black humor, that,
Which
well,
is
it
good.
makes more sense that I come to visit, and we see each other and have some time together than rather than I come to a funeral, and
Exactly.
yeah,
Funerals are for the living. We're living, and I'm living now, so let's do it now, kind of thing.
yeah, exactly.
Um, I think it's important too, Ben. I've said a lot of negative things about the medical community, and obviously, these are incredibly dedicated, hardworking, talented, intellectual people. But it's you don't have to go back very far to go, wow, we don't really know much, And like you take a guy like Matt Spadia, he's a walking modern miracle because he wouldn't be here if it hadn't been for all those great inventions and all that stuff. But at the same time, in my predicament, there's very little they could offer me, and that leads back to when I came home and I was referred immediately to oncology, and I was contacted by an oncologist, and now that I'm managed under their care, and you're going to do all this, and so I began to ask questions, um, and so that was they're going to recommend me to start chemo right away, and I won't bore you with all of it. You know this story, but in essence, most people are told what they're going to do. They're told what to do. They're not given an option, and they're not given all of the information. You're under their care, and they're telling you how they're going to care for you and what you're going to do.
Right.
And fortunately, again, having a robust background and having personal experience watching people go through chemo and radiation, I've always felt that it ran counterintuitive to um, the healing process for me.
Hmm.
Throughout our lives, we're told to avoid harsh chemicals and certainly poisonous things, and we're also, you know, told preventatively that we need to avoid radiation at all costs. And we're talking about radiation from the sun. I've had millions of x-rays because I always played hard and got hurt and broke everything. And so, when in the early days of x-ray, man, they'd put this giant thick lead drape over you, and except for the part they were x-raying, and then everybody would wear drapes of lead and run into another part of lead filled room and do an x-ray. And so, it's radiation. And now they're going to
Yeah.
say, no, now we're going to radiate you.
Yeah.
Um, that is just absurd
Yeah.
to say that be, we're going to poison you and burn you to cure you. Um, and I'm not saying it doesn't help in some cases or that some people don't get some years out of it, but we're not curing cancer through that methodology. Um, we're knocking it back a little bit, but those cells are in all of us
Yeah.
and they remain in all of us. So cancer doesn't come back, it never went away. And I think we need to be honest about that. So the beautiful part of knowing that for me was not being at all surprised or disappointed to know that here I am in September being told that you got 6 months. And incidentally, you mentioned the 9 month. I laughed and I said, "Oh, okay, so 6 months." And he said, "Maybe."
Mm.
And I said, "Okay, Dr. Ward, let me give you a little hint here about what I've been doing." And so I told him about the surfing, the bike riding, and all the stuff I've been doing with the grandkids and riding horses on the beach and doing things with you, kayaking and shooting guns and hiking. And I said, I remind you that I'm not your normal patient. And he said, okay. And I said, so do you want to revise your estimate? I give you that right. And he laughed and he said, look, I'm saying maybe 6 months, but you perhaps might be an exceptional case. You might go 9, but you might not make it 6 either, to be clear. I said, okay, fair enough. I said, we'll see. And I was being playing with it, being lighthearted, black humor, as you say.
Mhm.
Um, and I think having the peace that we talked about allows one to um, have that sense of humor.
Yeah.
Uh, we're created in God's image, and so I've always known that God has a tremendous sense of humor, and that's completely always overlooked. But I believe God laughs, and I believe God laughs heartily, and so I've always felt that if you can't laugh at yourself, you're not allowed to laugh at others. So, as you know, my humor is frequently self-deprecating. I like to poke a lot of fun at myself. So, this has been a great opportunity over the last year and a half to do that. I'm a skinny, frail, old bald guy now, and most ego's been removed. I think as long as we're walking around, there's some retention of ego for man, but um, having been stripped of most of that has been a blessing as well.
So would you say that
Not,
that's a huge change that's happened since your diagnosis, and well, not just your diagnosis, but all of the physical symptoms that you've had? Has that sort of like increased that spiritual factor for you that is humbling, that is, this ego removal?
yeah. And that's what the scriptures always tell us is that, we learn throughout the Old Testament, but the New Testament confirms that um, we're going to put off this physical self and that all that thinking is terrestrial or fleshly. We're thinking as a being that, and we have this self-awareness, but we're created as spiritual beings first. And it was a fall from grace that created death. And I think we were created initially as eternal beings and to walk and talk with God. But that through our fall, mankind's fall, we basically inherited a body that's now corruptible and that will return to this corrupted state. And so um, the removal of that ego
Mhm.
and the loss of self-reliance and dependence upon one's physical strength
Mhm.
is the most beautiful, compassionate, loving thing that could ever happen to us. And so, like for me, it's been, um, this, like I say, humbling, but just it's living in this state of such incredible gratitude. And what it did for me, Ben, there was a period, and I've told you this story. And again, this is going to be very self-deprecating and humbling to say this. Um, but at about why these always happen early in the mornings. My 3:30 experience. Let's call it 3:30 again. But I found myself when it was pretty, a month or two after being home. Um, I'm throwing up a lot, and I'm got stuff going the other way. Um, so I found myself on the can one night, 3:30 one morning type thing, and I'm I'm in the bathroom, and I'm not feeling good, and I got having diarrhea, and then feeling the need to vomit, and I'm looking between my legs, wondering if I can puke between my legs because I don't think it was safe to get off the toilet. Sorry for all this. But again, a year ago or 2 years ago, I couldn't have admitted this stuff about myself. I want to be strong but guy, right? But anyway, I started laughing at the absurdity of my predicament. And I mean, laughing heartily out loud. And I said, again, the informality of my relationship now to God, which
Yeah.
is such a beautiful thing. As I started laughing, and I'm laughing out loud, and I go, "Hey, I asked for this, huh?" I asked if I could come home, and here I am. So
I'm home.
uh, I'm home, and 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 I'm. Some might think it disrespectful to be praying to the creator of the universe while sitting on the toilet, going, having,
Unfiltered.
this. Yeah. And I'm laughing because, again, it's just the informality of it and the trust and the grace to trust and the faith to trust, all a gift. Um, and so I'm laughing and I'm thanking him, Ben. I literally was sitting there going, oh my God, I am so grateful to you, Lord. I'm so thankful that I have this right now because I'm talking. This is the clay pot created by the hands of God, talking to the creator, spinning me on the wheel and shaping me and molding me and allowing me at that moment to be as abased and humiliated. And that's where all that's that ego and all those fleshly things dissipate. Comes back. We want to hang on to it.
Yeah.
We want to have some sense of self-worth and whatever. And I battle that to this day. Um I get up in the mornings and I wake up and I'm thankful, and but I'm also super super aware, like I'm like start talking and thanking God for everything that the day's going to bring and for
So do
all
you
the
ever feel
blessings that
any
I
kind
have.
of like, do you ever feel any kind of like conflict or battle with these things in yourself where you would say it's ego versus gratitude, or, strength versus grace, like strength of flesh versus strength of spirit? Or would you say that it's all pretty quiet on the inside, that you're pretty aligned in your
Yeah, I
perspective?
would say for the most part, pain's a really weird thing, and there's I had a thought there when you were starting to ask that. There's such a dichotomy between the flesh and the spirit, and we war. Paul wrote it many, many times that he warred, and he was an apostle of God and above all, but he warred with his own flesh, and he at one point he cries like he's like, the things I want to do I can't do, and the things I don't want to do I find myself doing, and so you know um, yeah, of course I still struggle with that. I'd like to be more of a spiritual being, but I'm still walking around every day, and I've got things to do and things that I have to get done and accomplish. And I got a list started today of things I've got to tackle, and they get in the way of that. But at the same time, I'm more frequently drawn. Like it's easier for me to just,
Mm.
hey God, man, at the end of the day, you're going to have to help me get through this part, or make this happen. I'm not going to get it all done. I'm not going to. Nothing will be fully prepared for your mom when I do go. And the irony is, we were talking about this the other day, and we have very candid conversations now, and some humor in this. The reality is, your mom could go before me.
Yeah.
But you got to go back to that. We're not guaranteed days, and so I think that helps too, to recognize that you know uh, we're all in this finite state. So I'm a gift to me from God is to have this peace of knowing that I've accepted His salvation through death on the cross and resurrection. Um, and I think there's a couple things I want to go back and touch on. Just I medically, I did not choose to do chemo and radiation because um, once I delved into it and I demanded concrete answers. None were provided. I was guaranteed that I'd do 6 months minimum of chemo, and it's a four chemical cocktail that renders you basically useless. I would be in and out of the hospital if I lived through it.
Yeah.
Um, and then at least 2 more months of chemo and radiation. So we're looking at 8 months. And in that 8 month period, to be gross again, everything that comes out of my body, sweat, blood, pee, urine, excrement, would be highly toxic to
Yeah.
anybody. So your mom as primary caregiver, if I chose to do the chemo route and tried to stay at home, would have been the role of caregiver would have required her to wear a hazmat protection, a face shield, etc., rubber gloves to clean up after me. And then I would not have been allowed to see the grandkids for that entire period of up to 8 months. Probably rarely leave the house, couldn't be around other people. I'd have no immune system whatsoever. Um, Essentially, a shell of a human being getting poisoned and burned into oblivion. And your mom and I made that choice. We made it sitting in front of that doctor at the chemo center, but that's not the way we chose to do this. And so once again, going back and saying, "Hey God, I don't want to do it that way. I want to take quality over quantity. And if I get 8 months or 5 months or 3 months of great time, and I
Yeah.
get to see the grandkids and you guys, of course, first and foremost, your mom and then you guys and the grandkids, it was like that was all that mattered to me at that moment. And so the quality over quantity, because they could only, the best study, handpicked, cherry picked study that she could provide to me said that if I did the 8 months, gave them a year of essential torture, that there was a 39% chance that I could make it 3 years. And that's to flip that narrative, that's a 61% chance that I wouldn't make it
Yeah.
3 years, but that I was essentially going to give up about a year because after doing that for 8 months, it would take 3 to 4 months to even recover from that. So, not a good trade off. And so that was an easy decision to make. And that also leads, in my opinion, to a much higher degree of gratitude about each day and a focus for, okay, I'm going to try and make it to BMX racing to watch Xavier today in Hudson. Today, I'm going to try to make it with Maverick and Ryder to um, see horseback riding lessons or soccer or,
Right.
um, it just became these little priorities. Today, I'm going to try to ride my bike to the top of uh, Rough Go Trail, or I'm going
Mhm.
to try to make it to the top of God's Peak, or whatever. And so setting these little mini goals, um, because
All
I
right,
was
let me
choosing.
stop you really quick because I can tell I'm getting pretty dark here. Let me try and get some lights on in the room.
Okay, to bring it up to a Oh boy, how am I going to do that? Might have to just hold it. Um, to bring it to a present state, I guess, or to catch up. Uh, it appears that my health is waning. Don't know if I'm going to be able to do this, but I got to plug it in, keep it plugged in. Have to do some heavy duty editing here.
It's
Um,
okay.
oh, I think I just figured a way to do it. Plug is on the bottom of the phone, so it sticks out.
Yeah, so it's
Okay,
I actually thought of doing the same thing with like two books, putting it on two books and then having the plug go in between the books. But for now, I think I have enough energy. Um, we could,
there.
it might be possible if you want, we can kill this recording, start a
I
new
got
one,
it,
and
and
we'll start
I,
with it turned the other way.
I think I just propped it up. Doesn't appear to be interfering with the picture, so got a
Okay, perfect.
salt and pepper shaker holding it together.
There we go.
But
So
yeah, so
you're saying to bring things up to the present.
I've been struggling a bit physically. I'm losing a lot of weight. I'm having quite a bit of, admittedly now, some pain. Started out as that I would put into more of a category called uncomfortable originally, price of admission. But yeah, it's just over the last couple of weeks, I've had a lot of pain. Um, but again, I chalk that up to what we've now referred to as the price of admission. If I didn't have that, I wouldn't be here. So I don't know where it's going to go from here. Obviously, cancer is an ugly um, demise for most at the end. And I have apparently an allergic response physiologically to morphine or opioids. So I've never been able to. My body hasn't tolerated those. I've only done that twice in my life. Had a morphine, and both times was an absolutely horrific response. My body doesn't tolerate that, so I haven't.
What kind of
I got to.
response was it?
Um, Terribly hallucinogenic, frightening, and yeah, I mean it's um, disconnected from my body, then leading to I don't know what psychosis is, but I almost feel like I'm losing my mind. Um, so it's technically not really an option for me.
Right.
I don't want to consider that as an option, and I'd like to find something holistic. I thought I found my answer in Proverbs 31 when I came home. Uh, I read this thing in Proverbs and it was beautiful. I was like, huh, there's my answer, maybe. I'm not sure it is now because, um, see if I can find this real quick. Proverbs 31, verse 6. Give strong drink unto him that is ready to perish, and wine unto those that be of heavy hearts. So I figured, okay, the wine's for you guys, the strong drink's for me. When I read that, and I was like, there's my answer. I'll just have a whiskey.
Yeah.
But all my problems are in my stomach right now. So I'm not sure I can drink strong drink. I haven't tested it yet, but I thought that was originally a beautiful answer to my
Yeah.
needs. May still be. Um,
Well,
but
speaking of
anyway, I've got
advice, though, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions here, and seeing as how you gain so much strength and inspiration and influence from the Bible and the teachings in the Bible, um, I'm curious if you have any advice for people that are currently sick, currently in pain, chronically in pain, and that are either not religious or spiritual, or maybe are struggling spiritually, that maybe there's some faith shooken by some sort of illness or some circumstance. If you would have any kind of advice, because you've mentioned often the advantages that you've had, and because of the experiences you had growing up and the awareness you have for these things and the steadfastness in your faith, if you had advice for people that are not as gifted or aware.
it's an interesting way to. So there's an important component of understanding what faith is, and faith is a gift. It's not something mustered up from within. Um, it's a gift that's given, and you have to remind yourself of that. In that, if it wasn't a gift, then we'd brag about it. Is how it was put by Paul, um, and that goes back to that ego, and that um, will never be void of ego. But faith is a gift, and God says if we ask according to His will, He'll grant us anything. So the key is understanding His will. What what would be God's will for us is to have faith. So He says He'll give it liberally, and so I think anybody, whether you possess faith or not, knowing first of all that it doesn't come from within and it's not mustered up or something that we can do ourselves is paramount to the receiving of faith, asking for that gift. You being evil would give a good gift to your child who asks for it. How much more your Father would give you good gifts to those who ask Him. So if we ask according to God's will, and those are those things that not for our benefit, but for others' benefit necessarily. In other words, I'm never going to ask to be rich, but I can ask to be rich in faith. That'll be granted. And so God never gives us more than we can handle at one time. So, and that's probably true of faith because that would go to the ego. And I think we see that. So you and I talked recently. We recapped the Chase Hughes podcast, and the intro to that was incredibly egotistical in my thought, process. And so,
Yeah.
you can be given a lot of things, but if then it can, I've told you this many, many times, but all cursings can become a blessing and all blessings can become a curse. So it's what we do with these things. So I would say anybody who's going through, if you lack the faith and if you lack these things, then open your heart and open your mind to asking God, hey man, I don't even know if you're there. It's a valid thing. And if we can't be honest about that, um, then we're never going to be able to receive. So, hey, if you're really there, and God certainly can open our heart and our mind if we're willing and open. It's the willingness and openness that He can work with. It's the shut out, agnostic, apathetic rejection of His possible existence. And I don't remember my exact prayer. My journey into this was very informal, but I do remember that it was informal enough that I said, "Look, I think you're there. I'm pretty sure that. So I'm going to trust you, and I'm going to accept you, and I want you to help me and guide me." Kind of a prayer. Again, I don't remember it verbatim, but it was just this openness and this willingness to say, "Okay, I'm going to start down this path," and maybe that's where. It does appear that when Jesus healed, taught, counseled, prophesied, it all started, it was a conditional thing and or a command in a sense, to the person who hadn't walked in 30 years. He's first thing he said was stand up and walk. That's the most absurd thing ever. How can you stand up and walk when you haven't stood on these legs in 30 years? How can you see when you have go do this and you know
Hmm.
it does, and I think we skip over or gloss over those things. There is a part of it that requires us to say, not, oh, I can't, but to say, okay, I will try. And I think, for me, whatever led to the circumstances that led to my opening my heart many years ago, that's a gift to any human being on this planet. And any loving parent or God would want that for their child. So, to anybody who's going through pain, pain is debilitating and it's exhausting. And it can lead to a very, very, very negative mindset and even a collapsing of hope. And I think if one's open to it or cries out, it can actually have the opposite effect where it can lead to renewal, faith, hope. Again, not in the flesh. We're all going to put this off.
Yeah.
It's,
One thing it seems like to me
it's
is that you really can't have Christianity without hope. I mean, hope is really that it's a key component to the faith.
100%. Yes, it all comes down to that. It is a hope. And Paul talks about that extensively in the letters to the various churches throughout Eurasia, and hope is a faith in the things to come, is what it says. And so it's not the immediate. Again, I don't expect this pain to be alleviated, lifted off. Why would it be? We're all doing it. Death is, well, it's as tough as birth or harder. And birth for every, you, physiologically, again, going back to that, it's what an incredibly brutal process.
Yeah.
And yet we're all grateful for it. It's painful for the mom. It's painful for the child. It's horrific. Um, but it also then is this beautiful metamorphical transition from being in a womb and to taking a breath and being
Yeah,
out
but
here
it's
like
funny. It's funny
this.
that you bring this topic up because that's something that I've noticed without looking for it in a lot of secularist perspectives and arguments. You see this position that they take that um, I don't want to bring a baby into this world because there's too much pain, there's too much suffering, it's too messed up. I don't know if I would be a good parent. I don't think I would be. I don't really like my parents, so I would probably be a bad parent, or my child wouldn't like me. All these things, always you hear these different perspectives in secularist people, but you notice that all of that has to do with a sense of hopelessness, or
Mhm.
this lack of awareness for
Yeah.
the gift that you're describing, and the hope and faith that you're doing something right by bringing a child
Yeah.
into the world.
Yeah. No greater gift, man. No greater gift. It's such an incredible blessing. It's such an incredible at least parenting done right or halfway well is a reduction of one's own ego as well. It's not all about you anymore.
Right.
It's about this person you're responsible for. And I think that's a beautiful thing to experience the opportunity to parent. It also is an insight into, in a tiny glimpse, it gives us the opportunity to see how we're viewed and how much we're loved
Mm.
um, and how frail we are. Once you've got this little tiny thing that can't, I mean, just set it down. It's not a deer that's up and running in an hour or a horse. It's we need to be cared for a long, long time as human beings, and I think that's we're the highest order of being. Again, created in the image of God, and I think that it's the way He wanted it. He wanted to show us dependence and reliance upon something external from ourselves, and then He wanted us to experience what it's like to give life and nurture life and have this intense hope that it loves you back, um, created with free will and doesn't always come back. And, to this is emotional to me to think about is that this gift that I've had bestowed upon me of this last year of um, through my frailties and this process of prolonged death or life, however you choose to look at it, has given me this emotional, brought me to a great place. And again, it's my frailty. I've got a high pain threshold that's been a detriment sometimes throughout my life. Physically, I seem to be able to, I always thought it was a macho cool thing, but in a weird way, it's probably not. And it also hinders us from that. But anyway, that high threshold um, now isn't as high as it used to be. And so, but it seems to trigger more emotion. Um, Chelsea wrote me, I think I shared with you when we last talked, this phenomenal letter. And I got it just 2 or 3 days before you and I talked last. And
No, actually, I don't
um,
think you mentioned that to me.
okay, so it was such a gift, and to read it, and then you and I had that talk, and the things that you said to me um, you triggered me emotionally at the time. And I haven't shared this with you, but we hung up the phone, and I started praying, and I was just sobbing. It was just in a incredibly grateful way. The things that you said to me and shared with me were so impactful and so emotional. And literally, I was just sitting right here at this table, eyes closed, transported almost um, in a spiritual place. It's hard to describe this.
Sure.
It gets very, very dark, but I can feel myself rushing through space, um, tears pouring down my face. And this may sound strange or freak you out a little bit, but just uttering, Paul calls it a spiritual language, but just unintelligible to me. People call it speaking in tongues. I had that brief, just discussion of language coming out of me for a few seconds, after we hung up the phone, and it was gratitude. It said we speak in a spiritual language that God understands, and that is so. I wouldn't get to experience all that without the state I'm in and having this prolonged thing. And I've looked at, um, I've lost friends abruptly to heart attacks or crashes or now bee stings and weird things. And um, I always felt like, man, that's not how I want to go. And so to have had this year and a half and whatever else comes, I just got to remind myself every day that this is such a blessing to have had that conversation with you that triggered that response where I'm just transported and leaving my body behind for a few minutes and rushing through. I don't even know how to describe this. I'm moving at a rate of speed, Ben, through space towards this unbelievably intense love that can't be described, where I'm not tears of sadness, but tears of just such intense joy that you shared the things that you shared with me. It was an affirmation for the very purpose of being here and living, why you're put here in the first place. And so um, you gave me a great gift that day because it took me into that next space of spiritual thing that I wouldn't get to experience. Um, sorry, my low device storage. Um, oh, it's doing it again.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's going to keep doing it. And low device storage. Device storage is running low. You should stop the recording and free up device data. I've hit OK like 5 times. So we might have to cut it short here, buddy. Do you see that on your screen or?
No, that might just be on your phone.
Okay. Okay. Well, then we'll just keep going. I'm good. I
Uh,
probably should wrap it up in a few minutes. I got to call Kayla back and I got to leave here in half an hour to get to the writing lesson. But yeah, so I mean, and we can pick this up anywhere, Ben.
yeah, I mean, I
I
have so many questions and topics I wanted to cover, but we just I think we were getting into uh, so many great topics here that I think are important to
yeah,
discuss. And as you know, my goal with this channel is to try to do the most help and bring the most awareness to the spiritual truth, the reality of spirituality. I think
yeah,
that I think that like with many invisible pollutants and poisons, I think that a lack of spirituality does more harm than can be measured in people's lives, especially that for the individual. And I've
yeah,
learned that lesson time and time again personally. That when you I totally agree with you that you have this ebb and flow in life, that you live in a material world, and so matter is upon you whether you like it or not. But you know anytime I've strayed too far from the spiritual path, it's led to worse and worse outcomes. And when I've returned to a spiritual path, it's led to better and better outcomes. And I've started to notice that with other people's lives, and even reflected in the history and thoughts of the world. And so that's when I realized that this was uh, this should be my mission. I've always heard from people about my conversation ability, and that I should be a teacher of some sort, and an educator. And so this is I have to thank you for joining me on this journey to try to educate people on your experience, the nature of pain and belief and gratitude, and trying to shed light into the illusion of ignorance and just pure materialistic ways of living.
we come into this world with nothing and we leave with nothing,
That's
you
right.
know? So, yeah, Ben, thank you. We'll resume it. I think it'd be worth that. And I think there's a lot more to discuss. I think it's important too that probably we go back and look at some what I would call my shortcomings in terms of, but also they are what they are now. And I think you and I have talked a lot about religion and various forms of religion and various religions, but then even just getting into what would be classified as Christianity.
Hmm.
And I think there's some really important things to discuss there,
Hmm.
because I think they can be just as damaging or take people off track or give us a false sense of security or hope. And I think it's important to address those things because, um, at least from my perspective, they're a personal experience, but I also believe them concretely in my soul that we need to really avoid um, being religious, I guess is the best way to put it, at the expense of, like you would classify it as spirituality, but I would classify it as having a relationship. Um, and I think there's a big difference between the trappings of ritual and um, legalism, also materialism. Um, and I think it's important to, yeah, so we should talk about those things, especially too, because I think they're important. I wouldn't want to mislead anybody and have them think, man, that guy's a Christian. Um,
Right.
because I think
There's a
that's too
difference here.
broad. It's too broad
Yeah.
and it's too all encompassing and open. And it's a very, very, not misleading, but it could take the focus off what's actually really does matter.
Mm.
And I think that's important to address.
And in short, what would you say does matter? Like, if we're going to say what it's, maybe people are trying to comprehend what you're talking about. They're going to meditate or pray on everything that you just said. And what would you say is where that compass needle needs to be pointed?
It's very simple. It is understanding that God loved us so much that he gave his only son, that whoever should believe in him would not perish but have eternal life. It's the affirmation that we are created beings, that we're in a fallen state, and that we've been redeemed through this gift of faith that's not of ourselves, so that we can't brag about it. We've been given this free gift and a pathway back, and it's just that simple. Um, that's all that matters.
Okay. Okay. Well, then thanks, Blake. It was great to talk
Yeah.
with you. For sure, you and I will have more talks and we will get into this stuff and privately, but thank you everybody for watching up to this point, and be sure to let us know in the comments if you would like to see another chat between my stepfather and I on this subject. So thanks everybody, and thank you, Blake, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Bye
Love
for
you.
now. Love you too. Bye for now.
Bye. I mean, everything, it's so vast, and we can't even begin, the human mind can't begin to comprehend this vastness. We're always in this period of discovery. Newton's laws of physics, it's named after Newton. He just discovered it. The law itself was already there. We're not the authors of these things, but we'll discover that, and we'll grow in the knowledge of that, and we have eternity to do that. It's been a hard year physically for me, but it's also been one of the greatest blessings of my life to have walked through this last year, because it's this constant reminder that life is short. It's shorter for some than others. To have counted this year or be bitter about it, or be frustrated in my pain or my weaknesses or my lack of ability to do certain things that I used to enjoy, it's like, that's such a baby attitude. I hate to say it, but man, embrace it. we got to get through this part first. And we had to have gone through all this, had to have been tasted the worst, because you'll never know the best until you taste the worst. You know, you wouldn't know joy if everything was perfect. And I'm not saying, you know, you'd sign up to go, hey, yeah, that sounds great. I want to get closer to God, so I'm going to endure this year of cancer and surgery and, you know, but I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade it. We enter this world suffering and leaving this incredible place of tranquility, liquid peace, with a beating heart right there and feeding tube, to being just mashed into this world. That's suffering, and yet it's the beginning of life. So the suffering that accompanies the end of life is no different, but it's then the trigger for the new life, the next life. That's, you know, that submission. It's a submission. It's letting go of the ego. It's letting go of the pride. It's letting go of I'm in control. You know, you said, oh, you don't have that much fear. I think I have fear, but that runs completely counter to where I have to be with God, because I can't use that same, I'm going to get myself out of this, or I'm going to conquer it, or I'm going to push myself through it. It doesn't work that way with spirituality. It doesn't work that way with God. If there's anything that's scariest to me, it's like, I don't ever want to think I'm okay and not. And, you know, there's an assurance in the Spirit of God that fills us with knowing that we're okay. You know, how does a loving God let people suffer? Okay, that's the age-old thing. I would have said it 23 years ago. It would have been one of my chief arguments. I had a lot of them. We made a mess out of this planet. We were in a very, very, very fallen state. We've been redeemed, but that redemption is still a hope until we recognize it. I'm in a different place now than even the previous interview. It's flowing throughout the day where I get up and I may not feel super, super great, but I can have this intense hunger to go look up a verse or to just start talking to God in such a conversational way. It's not, there's absolutely zero ritual in this for me. It's sometimes like super informal. Like, hey God, you know, I think I forgot to pray for this person this morning. You know, he obviously has got it under control. So that's all for us. It's really easy. Pray for others.
Okay. So we are back. Thank you so much for coming back, Blake.
You.
Where we left off, definitely demanded a part two, and that was with discussing the difference between religiosity and a personal relationship that you have with Christ. And that is something that I think is an important distinction. And I remembered also from our previous talk that you had said, I would call it spirituality, you would call it a personal relationship. And so right off the bat, I thought, let's just get into how you would define a personal relationship versus spirituality generally, and then the much larger issue of religion and religiosity.
Okay. Definition. I think it's entirely possible, and it's backed up by Scripture that God has visited man throughout the history of the Bible in some sort of all visible, bodily, or audible form. Takes on different, and as well as other interesting. But all throughout that, there's a consistent. You know, in the very beginning, Adam walked with God. You know, we were created in His image, in His likeness, and I believe that we were created to be friends and to have this relationship with Him. And I think it's not unlike the desire I would think that most normal parents would have to have this incredible relationship with this beautiful thing that in some weird way they created. or had a hand in. So the relationship itself is akin to that, in my opinion, where it's conversational, casual, beyond casual to where it's help, I need you, or where do I go now? How do I navigate this? In the same way we would seek that counsel from a parent, perhaps, or something. Whereas religion, any religion, is a belief based on a belief system, perhaps checks and balances, ritual, um, and it probably fills a purpose um, in terms of making one feel better or grounded or aimed, or however you'd put it, like they have some destination, some goal.
Yeah.
But for me, there's always been a really, really stark distinction. And I grew up not having any background in um, any form of religion. My dad was a very, very devout atheist. Um,
Okay.
my mom, um, I really don't know what she had, but my cousin, her, my uncle, his family, they were Presbyterians. So when we would travel to visit them for Easter or Christmas or whatever, we would find ourselves attending some sort of a um, church service, which I always found kind of fascinating and, like
Mm.
most kids, extremely boring. And, uh,
Yeah.
it just, I didn't get it. So I didn't have any real background or any impetus to start looking in that direction. And frankly, through my youth, I always thought of religion and was very demonstrably vocal about this was kind of a crutch that people needed to get them through weak spots in their character or weaknesses in their um, own ability to navigate tough situations. That was my view. Um, all that obviously changed. But yeah, so I think there's a big distinction between, and I think it's important to note that because I think it's very, very dangerous to settle into a comfort zone of religion and thinking that you're okay and that you've
Mhm.
negated this beautiful relationship. It'd be the idea of as we just talked about, like it'd be the idea of knowing that I have a parent somewhere far off, but never really having anything to do with them or something. You know what I mean? Or a friend. I mean, it could be
Yeah.
anybody. And you know that you really deep, true friendships last through long periods of maybe non-contact,
Mhm.
and that's not atypical to the relationship that I've had with God. There's you know there's a busyness to life. It's demanding. The Bible calls it the cares of this world that can choke out that relationship at
Yeah.
times. And so, but that relationship based thing, it's it it's always there. And so for me, even through those drought periods where I wasn't as close to God as I would like to have been or should have been, or however you want to put that, um, never dulled the um, knowledge or the belief that they were there. It isn't even a belief. It's just when you have a relationship, they're there.
Right.
It's not.
Right.
And I think when you have a religion, then there's that you're kind of trying to bolster your faith all the time to really remind yourself that you do believe this. And so I guess that's the distinction, Ben. It's hard for me. Maybe I'm not articulating it well, but it's
Well, if I can jump in there and just kind of speak to my own perspective, growing up with you, that's something that I had mentioned to you before, and in the context of this conversation, that's something that's been rather that it's been rather kind of jarring in my upbringing and my relationships with spirituality as a whole, religion as a whole. and often seeing your devotion. And of course, we hadn't really had talks like this growing up, between us, and in this regard with religion and spirituality in Christ. And so, yeah, I noticed that you did never seem to have doubt. You never seemed to struggle or wane. Of course, like you said in the previous talk, there's kind of the ebbs and flows of that and the cares of this world. But yeah, it's interesting because then, like you said, there's a different mechanism at play with people that are more involved in the religious side of things. And I did notice that there seemed to be more doubt or more internal strife with people that would go to church. And it was interesting to me that, for you, you definitely focused more on the spiritual and the philosophical parts of that relationship and what God is and what God means and what that relationship means to you. Whereas other people, I would notice they'd go to church, they would talk about church. They would talk about the experience of church, not God. They would talk about the experience of the people that, the friends that they made in church, or what the pastor was talking about that week or the week before. And so things like that. And so that was something that when I was growing up was definitely odd to see this difference, that you never seemed to struggle with that aspect, that relationship that you have with God.
I think that's true. And I have to say that it all goes back to having had that very intense personal experience. And there's, as we've talked about, I believe it was in Ephesians, but it talks about um, faith is a gift. It
Mhm.
is not works so that nobody can brag about it. And so, like, the fact that it's unshakable for me or it's always there has been a gift. And
Yeah.
um, I think I've shared with you many little clips from my favorite guy that I was lucky enough to have as a pastor for a while. And it was a very, very informal thing. He did, prior to my meeting him, pastor a traditional church, but which is kind of a fascinating story. But by the time I'd met him, he was completely devoted to what he believed was the true way it should be, which was to have people holding churches in their having these church things in their homes. And there's I believe, four references in the New Testament, Paul saying, salute the church that is in their home, referring to individual people, couples predominantly, that opened their homes to home meetings. Obviously, in the first century, they couldn't have what we think of when we say church is a building. And
Right.
it's not a building, it's an assembly. And Jesus said, where two or more are gathered in my name, I'm in the midst. And so his mission was to equip lay people. He didn't believe you needed to go to a seminary and get ordained to discover your personal gift from God in terms of whether that be teaching, evangelism, helping others, whatever. Um, but that you could do that through the power of the Holy Spirit as opposed to going to a college and getting a piece of paper about it. So anyway, unique view. One I to this day believe is probably largely the way it should be. And ultimately it is in other countries. Iran's going through it right now. They're purging Christians at an astonishing Nigeria. Um, some estimates are 30,000 people have been murdered in Nigeria in the last 3 years. Christians, villages burned, churches burned, etc.
Yeah.
So, until you have China, until you're being dragged out of your home and you don't have the luxury of going down the street to your denominational church, it won't return to that um, super hardcore, um, devoted place. It's anyway. I think that yeah, I I think I brought it up last time topically because it hit me when I've shared with people throughout my entire life. Oh yeah, I'm a follower or believer or whatever. The first question is, oh, where do you go to church?
Yeah.
Part of that, and I don't mean it, it's not an affront, but it's
Right.
always jarring. One out of slight embarrassment on my part to say, I'm not really involved anywhere. Cause then you're immediate like, ooh, boy, they're not really there, or there's a judgment feel. Uh, and it's okay. Um, and I'm not turned off to it. And I have been involved, as you know, in different places and throughout my walk and life with God. And nothing's ever been bad.
Sure.
I've got
Right.
bad vibes a few places where I've gone and went, whoa, there's something really going wrong here. And I believe that's a warning. That's something it's referred to as discerning the spirits. I think that and we're warned about it constantly throughout the New Testament, especially, um, to watch out because there's a lot of deceivers out there. And I think that should be pretty obvious. There's a
Yeah.
lot of people preaching for all kinds of reasons.
But that's
Um,
actually something that concerned me starting Gonzo Pilgrimage, and I try to keep a watchful eye and discern, as you described, because I understand that um, that's these subjects are fertile ground for charlatans, whether people that are unfortunately mentally unwell or people that have genuine nefarious interests,
yeah,
and and but at the end of the day, it's also what stoked me to make this project a reality is because I'm tired of spirituality of that sort being ammunition for atheists, and that genuine spirituality then just kind of, dissolves under those categories. And so, yeah, that's something that we definitely take really seriously here, and we try to discern. Um, and oftentimes, these people, maybe it's the same experience you've had, but these people kind of reveal themselves if you just ask a few questions, and when you just look close enough and ask with an open mind, but with a kind of a careful approach. Like these people usually reveal themselves really easily,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. Um, I've been having some abdominal stuff, so I may have to take a little break at some point here, just do a little walk around. But
Sure.
I I brought that up because I wanted to kind of put that out there. Um, I think there's a tremendous amount of what's called Christianity, and to focus on that um, how do I put it? I don't need to be tactful, I guess, but it's going to fall very, very short when judged. And there's a verse in Revelation that's scary. And Jesus said, many will come to me in that day saying, I am the Christ. And anyway, I'm trying to think.
Jesus said that many will come to me and say that they preached my name and did works in my name, and I will say unto them, I did not know you.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a reference to being lukewarm, and it makes him vomit.
Mhm.
And so I think if there's anything that's scariest to me, it's like, I don't ever want to think I'm okay and not be. And, there's an assurance throughout this, and there's an assurance in the spirit of God that fills us with knowing that we're okay. And I know I'm okay. And it's not by some measure that I've done you know, um, something to earn this at all. It's grace. And I've been given that grace, and I just need to hold on to that grace. But I also believe that there are hordes of people that are going to find out that they really weren't following Jesus. They were involved in a religion. And that's a scary, scary thought to me. Um,
And so that's actually a key point to clarify that they're putting the church before Christ, so to speak. That they're too focused on that sort of material or ritualistic aspect instead of the relationship.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's it, man. You nailed it. I mean, ritual is a big part of human nature somehow, and, and probably rightfully so. And if you look throughout the Old Testament, it was the old contract that God had with man. And as we got to the New Testament, or this Jesus coming, his entire purpose was in the old. God gave us this stuff, all these rituals and all this demanding stuff to prove to us that we couldn't do it. And there's no way we can fulfill the law, as basically Jesus said. And yet he fulfilled the law and
Mhm.
was. And so in the fulfillment of the law, then the entire thing pointed towards grace. So in that transition, obviously then it, it reshapes our thinking. And so for me, I'm not, or don't tend to be a ritualistic person. I don't measure things very well. I just do them. Um, and your mom and I are really opposite that way. She measures everything and she
Yeah.
does the same portion. She's really, and there's no knock against that. It's obviously, but I think in terms of a faith based thing, it could be very diverting
Hmm.
from what's really important to think that you fulfilled some rituals, whether that's reciting or bending the knee, doing these things, or turning east and doing something, and we can pick any of them. But I think if you look at almost all, to my knowledge, religions, then almost all denominations or branches or sects of each of those religions rely on very, very specific rituals.
Right.
And that seems dangerous to me and contrary to the spirit of God. And if you think of your own human nature and the flow and the excitement you have about things and all of that stuff, to me, it's like the same thing. There's days obviously where I'm at right now, and just to update since our last interview, we have, I'm now all, whatever you'd say, set up with hospice. Um, uh, been going through a pretty rough almost 2.5, 3 weeks, and, a pretty rapid decline physically, not emotionally or mentally, but the last couple of days have been a little bit better. But
Okay.
obviously, it was the impetus to go like, okay, well, I don't want to wait till the last minute to, you know, go through this cancer experience and put all that burden on somebody else. And I don't want your mom to have to be my nurse. So we're all set up with hospice, and they've been incredible so far. And, I feel a little guilty because I don't feel like I need them at the moment. But anyway, so I don't know. I wanted to bring that up just because I'm in a different place now than even the previous interview. Um, but it's flowing throughout the day where I get up and I may not feel super, super great, but I can have this intense hunger to go look up a verse or
Hmm.
to just start talking to God in such a conversational way. There's absolutely zero ritual in this for me. It's sometimes like super informal. Like, hey, God, I think I forgot to pray for this person this morning. He obviously has got it under control. So that's all for us. Um, but it's important for me. I pray for you guys every day. I pray for all these people, and I don't ever want to forget that. And there's times when I'm feeling uncomfortable or having a lot of pain where I'm like, oh man, it takes me away from and then I get this hunger to go back and just think about it. And that is so not ritualistic. It's so not religious. Um, and I think that's the danger. It's kind of like working out. People, oh, I got to go to the gym, but they say it in a way like, not really excited about it. And, for me, I've always found fitness has, a, has just been the byproduct of being really excited about playing,
Right.
whether, riding my bike, surfing, rock climbing, um, whatever it is. It's the fitness part, the cardio or the steps or whatever people measure right now on their little watches and stuff. I've never had to do that. I've always just having a blast playing soccer. You know, um, it's just like Uh, so that's that to me is kind of like a little, it's analogous to where I'm at right now, or have been, fortunately, through most of my walk with God. It's been fun. I don't, oh, I gotta carve out some time to pray right now. Um, it's more like, hey, God, hey, my Lord, I mean, there's times it's more formal. I'll be a little bit in awe, and I'm not going to just yell, hey, God. I'm like, oh man, I'll just sit there for a minute thinking, why do you even care about me? This little speck in the universe, but then I know he does. And so I'm like, hey, um, yeah, so it's,
Well, that's a good spot to dive a bit deeper in what we talked about in the first call when you said that I think you said you've been practicing a faith since you were 22, and it really started with you just saying, you know, I think you're there, and so I'm going to take that first step. The first step of trust, and I'm going to live in that trust. And one thing I've always known about you, and one thing that you and I definitely were a bit more oil and water when I was a kid was math. You are incredibly gifted when it comes to understanding math. Unlike me, I was always more of the, like poetry, philosophy, history, not so much math and science. But that makes me wonder, you seem to have like this automatic click with mathematics and science. And one of the things that my wife was asking to me about religion and Jesus Christ is God logical? Like, where does that come from? And there's certainly many connections to that, the logos, the logic, the law of God. And do you think that that's true? Do you see a connection there for you? And do you think that despite having a devout atheistic father, that 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 kind of automatic, logical, and reasonable connection is really why you are able to have this kind of relationship where, as you're well aware, people are not always so rational or not always so logical, especially when it comes to faith and spirituality.
I have to back up. When I was
Yeah.
in third, I had a really bad math experience, and I thought I was terrible at math and had no confidence in math and really struggled through it. I think I got an F in geometry and had to retake it one summer school. Um, but then somewhere along the way, it did click for me.
Hmm.
And when now my ex, but Kelly, was in nursing school, and I was trying to help. She was struggling with her homework, and I said, "Well, let me look at it." And it was some algebraic stuff or something, whatever it was. And I was like, "Oh, this is super easy," and I was explaining it to her, and she goes, "Well, that's easy for you because you're good at math." And I said, "It's the first time I've ever heard that in my entire life." I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm not good in math. I'm terrible at math." And so, fortunately, or again, luckily, I think maybe it was after I did find God, I all of a sudden had this super confidence about math. Not wouldn't claim to be a mathematician at any point, but it just became pretty easy. And again, that's a gift because I didn't think, I had no confidence around it. But
Hmm.
to your point, I think it 100%. Like, I look at everything now, man, I, at its core, God is the creator of the universe in my view. And as such, that means every law of physics, everything, it's so vast. And we can't even begin, the human mind can't begin to comprehend this vastness. But we're always in this period of discovery. And the other day, one of Newton's laws of physics was, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And I was thinking about that. And I don't even know why it came up, and I was really dwelling on it. And, um, and then I went, it's named after Newton. He just discovered it. The law itself was already there.
Yeah.
And that's everything we do.
Yeah.
We're not the authors of these things. Einstein's theory of relativity, which is now widely accepted and what would be called proven, but even after Einstein proposed this, E equals mc squared, energy moving at mass moving at twice the speed of sound. I think that's the equation. But, this genius mind theorized this, but it took decades for it to be proven. And it still makes me laugh. He's probably one of the smartest men that ever walked the face of the earth. And it was obvious. I mean, it was incredible that but it already existed, as all things do already exist. And we're going to continue to go through these periods of discovery. And so for me, and to your point, logos, Jordan Peterson has talked about that a lot, but that logic, of course it is. To me, it's like, well, duh, this was created. And when you look at what it takes to have this all function, and to the specificity, the movement, the balance of planets and traveling at speeds and gravitational pulls, and the what it takes to have life on this little dot, it's not an accident. It's not a bang. That luck, it's not primordial soup and an atom that evolved into Albert Einstein.
Mm-hmm.
It's this discovery on man's part of the genius and the vastness of what we call God, the Father. And so, yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. And like, that's part of that unshakable. Everything I attribute that I can't answer is because we haven't gotten there yet.
Mm-hmm.
It's a simple equation for me to go, well, yeah, we'll figure it out someday. It's like we talked about that verse that says we see through this glass dimly now, but at some point we'll be on the other side of that. We're looking through a bad window, or we can kind of make it out. Some people can see through there better than others, but none of us know what's really truly on the other side. And but we'll discover that, and we'll grow in the knowledge of that, and we have eternity to do that. And so I think this is just that little phase of discovery for us. And
Yeah.
so, yeah,
Do you have an idea of the beyond or the afterlife or God's kingdom, or are you comfortable in knowing you'll never know? Or do you have some kind of view or vision or hypothesis?
any hypothesis I have wouldn't matter, because it is what it will be. It is what prepared. It's what's been designed. It's been what God purposed us for, in my opinion. So it's exciting to think about, but to even begin to comprehend. It's like the human mind anthropomorphizes animals. Oh, they're doing that because, and we attribute a human characteristic to an animal.
Right.
Whatever it is. I think they're trying to tell us this, or whatever. And I always laugh because we don't know what's in the mind of a dog or a cow. They seem to be affectionate towards us at one moment or fierce in another, but we don't know what's going on in their mind. And so in the same vein, for us to go, oh, well, I think this, or gee, I read this, so I think that, and, to form a hypothesis, and it's not bad. I don't know that it serves a purpose. I read things that are so hard to comprehend, or what they actually mean,
Mm-hmm.
particularly like in Revelation or Daniel or Zechariah or some of these, where you're like, what does that mean? What is really all this? What's going to really happen there? And, again, I don't know that we'll know at some point, when, again, after it's transpired. So we will have discovered it, hindsight probably. So yeah, I don't really have a huge expectation. I read a thing of Paul. This is in the letter of, it's in Philippians, Paul's letter to the church in Philippi. For me to live is Christ, but to die is gain. And he says later, it says, having a desire to depart, to be with Christ, which is far better. Nevertheless, to abide in the flesh is needful for you. He's talking about his own life. That guy wanted to go. And he wanted to go be with his Savior and his Lord. And he wanted to go to that gain. Yet it was needful obviously for us, because he penned these letters in this spiritual place to show us how desirous he was to just get on with it. That he knew this was temporal and his sufferings here would end, and his strife here would end, and his persecutions here would end, and his frustrations with these upstart churches and the people that were to them. He called them wolves in sheep's clothing. And, they were. So I read those words and I'm, obviously I'm not there. And maybe it takes persecution and tremendous suffering or pain to make you want to get there. I think that happens. Pain might be our trigger to say, okay, I'm ready.
Do you think that might be its purpose
it
in
might
some
be.
way? Because
It
people really struggle with suffering and suffering and creation. This is actually what I've seen to be really the anchor or linchpin in a lot of atheist arguments. Even when they don't make that argument, if you pay close enough attention, what a lot of people have a problem with is the nature of suffering and uh, and creation, and that someone is behind that suffering, that God is behind that suffering,
nailed it.
and and so that's something that I think it would be important for us to discuss. Um, but I'm at a bit of a crossroads here with my questions because we could go one of two ways here, and so I'll let you decide. But these are two things that I think are really important to talk about, and I really wanted to get into them with you for myself and just to have this discussion with you. But I think it's an important discussion to have publicly for anybody watching because these are very serious topics. So one is what I mentioned with suffering and its purpose, um, and how that applies to God, and how can God be good when there's so much suffering in the world. That's a classic philosophical problem with religion. And secondly, um, sorry, this is hard for me to talk about. You talked about that he wanted to go, but that obviously there was need to remain. And obviously that's not the choice that Grandpa Carl made. In my opinion, his was a unique situation that you don't really see or hear about too often necessarily, where he was deteriorating to a point where he just decided that was enough now, in a very logical and sort of engineer's mentality. Um, and it reminded me of Stoicism. The Stoics famously had, I have to be careful with YouTube rules of language here, so I'm trying to be clear but not say too much that would get this video in trouble. But the Stoics had no problem with leaving life early. They believed, and I have it here, Seneca said that it could be done, not as long as it was not out of despair or petulance or emotional turbulence, but if you are calm and rational and make a rational decision where you prefer that a living life without reason or virtue is one that you don't have to live. If you decide that for yourself rationally, that's that your life no longer has reason or virtue, then it's in your hands. The Christian argument is obviously very firmly against this type of thinking, and so that's what I wanted to get into. Where does this stand for you? What is a valid argument for life and living, no matter what, in the Christian view?
Heavy topic, obviously. I would say my opinion probably has evolved in a sense from accept what I would call accepting the Christian view that, and not, I don't want to use the trigger word, so I'm avoiding that, but taking matters into one's own hands um, is scripturally and morally and ethically and against God and all that stuff. I have to plead slightly ignorant here. I don't know that I've ever really come across um, anything scripturally that would totally support that. It runs counter to my thought process, um, but I can't cite anything specifically. And I think that pain, um, like we haven't experienced, that would put a person in that place. Um, I mean, suffering is, the body's built and the human mind is built to want to live, and we fight death to the very, very bitter end. It appears for most human beings and animals. Um, so there is this innate built-in mechanism to survive, but we also see people and animals on the throes of those last that succumb. They give up. Um, you can see them being relaxed. You can watch a water buffalo getting eaten alive by 4 lions. It's and it's still fighting. It's laying there getting torn to shreds, and then it just, man, it's not dead yet. But there might be some weird little grace in those seconds. I know this is kind of drifting away from it, but so I'm not ashamed to say that I don't know if that topic is wrong. I'm not in a place where I could criticize another human being for getting to that place because I'm not there. So I don't know that it's wrong. Ben, I can't, like I said, I don't know that I've ever come across anything scripturally. You could go back to thou shalt not kill, or, you take some giant. So I don't know. It's a very, very unique thing. And I know at least 3 people that have chosen that route, different methodologies. I can't criticize any of them. They were in tremendous agonizing situations. And they made their choice. I can't imagine that would determine their eternity based on that decision alone.
Okay.
Because I think God is compassionate. Now, going back to that original thing, and we just need to touch on it. And again, this becomes a big theological thing, but how does a loving God let people suffer? Okay, that's the age-old thing. I would have said it 23 years ago. It would have been one of my chief arguments, and I had a lot of them. And the crux of that argument is that we're not living in this present state, the world, or however you want to classify this. We're in a fallen state by our own choice. And so sin entered the world through one man, and through one man sin was forgiven. We're atoms. We disobeyed, and so collectively as humanity, we made a shit mess out of this planet. And we've been at strife since we made that decision to go from this garden or whatever was created for us to walk in unison and have this relationship with God. We're in a very, very, very fallen state. And so we've been redeemed, but that redemption is still a hope until we recognize it. So that's the theology, I guess, but it's also the reality, and it's the common sense route to me. It's like, yeah, God didn't want people to suffer. That's absurd. We weren't created to suffer. We were created to have fellowship and this loving relationship. But we got to get through this part first. And we had to have gone through all this, had to have been tasted the worst because you'll never know the best until you taste the worst. And so
Mhm.
I think suffering, obviously, the Stoics probably would agree that it builds character. Um, if you look at nature, I know this is an analogy that's been forth many, many, many times, but you don't get pure gold. You don't pick it up. It's mined, it's pounded, it's dug up, it's smashed, it's
Mhm.
heated and burned. All those impurities come off through the refining fire ultimately produces a pure gold. You don't get your samurai sword.
Right.
Doesn't, it takes massive, a pearl is formed through irritation. It's like,
And wisdom often comes from suffering. I don't know too many people that just arrived at genuine wisdom alone.
agreed.
And so this is yeah, it's I would say, especially to any agnostics or atheists that are watching this, I would say do more research into the nature of suffering. Because I think often it's not what you think. I think that there is a lot of different interpretations and explanations and ideas in belief
Yeah.
in spirituality. I only just recently I was for um, just to sort of hype a potential other video for this channel. I've been negotiating with some Islamic people, hoping to try to convince some Muslims to work with me on this, and they're understandably skeptical. But one of them was explaining to me that when an atheist came and said, "How can you explain suffering to me?" he said, if life is a test, then you signed up for it. And, and it's not God's fault that you forgot. Then he said that, the argument he put forth was basically that God gave your soul, your being a choice. Did you want to come to earth? Did you want to be born? Did you want to have experience and qualia and suffering and joy and all the highs and lows? And you said yes. And now you're saying, where's God? Show me the answers. Give me everything explain it all for me. And he goes, well, why would he give you the answers before the test is done? No
Yeah.
teacher would do that. No good teacher. And so there's so many different interesting arguments, and obviously I'm not a Muslim, so that's not something that I'm sticking my flag into, but that's one perspective. And there
Sure.
are several. There are so many to look into. And um, I think it's a mistake to make this false connection of God created the world has suffering, therefore God created suffering, therefore I don't want to believe in God. I think that's requires a bit more evaluation.
Yeah, I would agree. I like his perspective. It's an interesting one. But yeah, I think suffering's an essential. You can't have the highs without the lows. I mean, I think we all pretty much innately that's built into us.
Mhm.
You wouldn't know joy if everything was perfect. Um, you'd probably be bored. And conversely, you wouldn't know to avoid things if there wasn't pain. So yeah, suffering, and it's funny, I can't claim it's been a hard year physically for me, but it's also been one of the greatest blessings of my life to have walked through this last year because it's this constant reminder that life is shorter for some than others. I just went to a 90-year-old's birthday party the other day, and I was like, wow, 25 years older than me, and she's probably gonna outlive me,
Yeah.
and it was kind of funny, I was like, you're not guaranteed any certain amount of days. So, like, to me, um, to have counted this year or be bitter about it, or be frustrated in my pain or my weaknesses or my lack of ability to do certain things that I used to enjoy, um, it's like that's such a baby attitude. I hate to say it, but like, man, embrace it. Um, and I'm not saying you'd sign up to go, hey, yeah, that sounds great. I want to get I want to get closer to God. So I'm going to endure this year of cancer and surgery and, you know, all this. But I wouldn't trade it.
Yeah.
I really wouldn't trade it, Ben. You know, it's led to this, like these earnest, like deep connections and it's the expression of love. Like we're getting to share 27 years of, well, you know, of relationship and what that relationship's about and what a blessing it is for me. Hopefully for you to look back on certain things and go, yeah, you know, and have, um, the positives and the negatives that are all part of a relationship. So yeah, I mean, if someone calls this suffering, and I know I've got the worst is yet to come, probably, um, I wouldn't have had all that I've had this past year without it. So it's almost essential, you know, like, and as it gets more and more and more intense, you know, this hospice thing has been a little study, as you know, we've talked about this. I'm not a candidate for opioids and morphine, and that's globally what's used to treat this. You know, I mean, it's like, okay, you're in a lot of pain. We got to try to mitigate that pain and try to keep you comfortable. Um, so we just dope the hell out of you, and to the point where it's often cancer ends mostly in like almost in an overdose. Um, at the moment, and it's historically, I can't take those drugs. They have an adverse, like an allergic. I have an allergic reaction to them. It's
Yeah,
so I'm.
just for the people that maybe missed it or forgot in the previous video, you had described that, you know, it's essentially nightmarish,
Yeah,
almost psychotic disassociation from your body with
yeah,
terrible visions.
yeah. It just has a really bad effect on me. So in my quest to avoid that, you know, I'm looking at what are holistic options and, you know, what things has God put here on this planet that I might be able to utilize. So, you know, I mean, I I don't want to put other people through hell either. You know, I don't want to at my in my whatever. Some people say, "Oh, you're just trying to be macho, or it's your ego, or whatever." But I do want to hope that I can endure this in some sort of more natural state, and that I don't want to resort to um, the aforescribed, you know, um,
Yeah, I know what you mean.
options. You know, I want to, and I don't want to put, you know, the best thing that's ever happened in my life, Gene, through more hell. You know, so you know, I kind of had to acquiesce the other day. I go, look, if I'm out of it, like if this has gotten into my brain and they tell you, look, we could give him some morphine or whatever it is, I'm going. Should not. It doesn't really like. Okay, if I go through a few days of that, or, you know what I mean. Like you make the call, baby. Whatever you need to do to make me not hurt you, that's kind of a priority. So while I don't, you know, want to have to resort to that, I'm kind of going to let go of it and let other people make the choices that need to be made at that point. And trust the process, I guess. But you know, the goal right now, Ben, is to just take it as it comes and rely on God's grace. And who knows, I might have a heart attack. You know, there's a million. God's a merciful God too, and I think that you know, if it gets there's a verse that says, you know, He's not going to let us be tempted beyond anything that we can bear, and you know, so hopefully, you know, I continue to gravitate towards the that strength and not rely on, you know, something man-made or something. That's a hope,
Mm.
but we'll see. Um, yeah, I don't know what to expect there, but anyway, I do know that I want to make sure we try to address all your questions and especially Tia's, and so fire away at me. Um,
There's a lot I could ask about that, and I'm a bit conflicted because I would love to dive into some of these things and discuss the nature of you know holistic treatment and yeah, spirituality, and sort of letting yourself go as a spiritual act to kind of deliver yourself into the hands of others as this progresses. I think it's emblematic of what you're going through spiritually, of letting letting go of the ego, letting go of your intent. It's like that old saying, that man makes plans and God laughs. And I think you're kind of in that position of, okay, no plans, no holding on. So, but I mean, I would, yeah, like to get into some of these other questions that I think are pertinent for people that are seeking and unsure. So, um, I would say, I think from that position, though, I mean, this talking about, and this is, I'm also trying to pivot for, just so that the audience knows, I didn't know about this hospice stuff. That was not, I wasn't aware of that beforehand. So I'm also adjusting to that. But I think, a big fundamental thing we touched on in the last talk, I had asked you about, you know, what can you say to people that have no faith but are experiencing illness and pain and suffering, or people that have faith and their faith has been shooken? But, one thing I really would like to get into, and maybe you've already touched on that a bit, but I'd like to really like nail it down in a back and forth, is your relationship with death, what you think your relationship or other people's relationship with death should be, I mean, and how your faith aids you in the face of death. Because specifically, people say that the fear of the unknown is humanity's greatest fear, and I think that that's why people are afraid of death, and I think that interestingly enough, that's also something that is hard for people to be convinced of faith, because so long as they're not sure about death, they can't really be sure about spirituality. These things are kind of linked for many people that struggle with that. And so, yeah, I'd be curious to know what your personal experiences is, given your situation and your diagnosis, and what you think people's relationship should be with death.
Oh boy, that's so deep. I guess first and foremost is that there should be an acknowledgement on all of our parts that we're all going to do this. Everybody gets to do this, and every living cell on this planet will also be a dying cell. And so, to avert the thought process around that,
Yeah.
it's like joy with no pain almost. It's like, how can you live if you don't die? It's there has to be an acceptance upon that. And so I guess first and foremost, it's like, why? Maybe it is the unknown. Maybe it's the innate built-in part that God put inside of us that we can't acknowledge, but he's saying, there is something more. Why would be afraid? And then that's maybe the counter thing to the atheist. Why would you be afraid of death at all if there's nothing else? That's kind of a preposterous thought to me just now. What's to be afraid of then? Why wouldn't you be excited about it ending? And so for me, I think it was C.S. Lewis called it the God-shaped void, human beings. And we spend our lifetime trying to put things in there. It's like the little kids games, you get a triangle, a square, and a brown peg. And, they're trying to figure out what shape fits in there. And we're trying to plug these things into our soul. Like, is it money? Is it happiness? Is it, ego? Whatever it is, nothing quite fits in that little slot, except that void can only be filled by God. So death, wow, it's coming. It's coming for me. It's coming for you. It's coming for, the turkey out in the field or whatever. I mean, it's going to happen, right? So why can't we acknowledge that? So let's acknowledge it, and let's say we're all going to head towards that. Next thing we have to acknowledge is we really don't have a choice typically and how that comes, what form it takes, how soon, how late. So there's an uncertainty around it. Maybe that scares people too. Um, and so I guess it's not a morbid topic. There's almost an absurdity that it's morbid to talk about death. Your mom and I have had these really candid conversations, sometimes laughing now about, when I was still out really riding my bike trying to get, with her. It occurred to me one day I was really short of breath, and I was like, geez, I, and we got done, and I told her later, I go, just by the way, if I have a heart attack or I tip over, I mean, feel free to drag me out of the road, but you don't need to call 911. You know what I mean? It's just part of the process. And we laughed. We were like, oh, that's kind of weird to think about. Like, what would you do? I guess you just call the coroner, or, you know, I guess we've had all this time to prepare our hearts and our minds and, form a little bit of a loose game plan around it. Right. But I mean, to be that comfortable around it, is really refreshing, such a funny way, it's like all different cultures have different ways they deal with death, but most of them are more intimate than we are. We put people in a hospital or in a rest home.
Mm-hmm.
Or you don't want them
Yeah,
over
we
here.
hide them.
We don't want to die right there.
Yeah.
There, call somebody at the last minute. Can you come take them to whatever?
Yeah.
Because death's pretty gross right at the end. There's a lot of physiological changes right at the end. And so, and it doesn't take long for the death process to start taking over the what's left, the shell. So I guess the first thing is for me, and you can't tell this to people, but is to make them aware that their own demise is imminent. The flesh is going to come off. We're going to leave this vessel.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you can accept that, then you can start moving towards what's next. And
Yeah, I mean, to something that occurs to me when you're describing this, I would say largely that it just seems irrational to be afraid of anything imminent and unavoidable in general. I mean, that's something that, I can understand if you're afraid of contracting a disease when you're in the jungle, or being afraid
sure,
of a predator. It makes sense if you, as if you're out hiking in the hills, that you're aware that maybe there's a puma or a mountain lion or whatever that's out there, and that's
yeah,
something to be aware of. But if, for example, they were to say that a comet is coming and there's nothing we can do about it and that's it, what good is it to be afraid of the comet? And when you put it into a larger scale like that, I
sure,
just, I think that's an important thing to be aware of is when you look at your life and, as some Greek philosophers say, like the unexamined life is not worth living. So when you examine your life, consider what is inevitable and eradicate any fear you have regarding
yeah,
that.
yeah. There's a real distinct line between self-preservation, which is a gift and it's built into us,
Mm-hmm.
then an acceptance of, but ultimately, that acknowledgement. We should do everything we can to, and that's what we're built to do. And as is all animals are. Obviously, there's mechanisms to survival, flight or fight
Yeah.
or whatever. But I mean, we're all built that way, and so that's a distinction that needs to be made. That isn't counter it. It doesn't run counter to the acceptance that we are still going to die at some point. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that's an important part. But you're right. It's so that would be, I guess, accepting that. Going back, I had a thought while you were just talking about that too. Is that we enter this world suffering. There's no way being forced out of the uterus through a birth canal and leaving this incredible place of tranquility, liquid peace with a beating heart right there and a feeding tube to being just mashed to
Yeah.
where your soul is reshaped and into this world, whether it be cold or hot or facing imminent, immediate danger, being forced to get up in hours and run if you're an animal of flight on the plane, or, it's like the vulnerability. It's like, so that's suffering, and yet it's the beginning of life. So the suffering that accompanies the end of life is no different. And technically, it goes back to that metamorpho. It's where, how can a man, I think it was Nicodemus asked Jesus, how can a man enter, you can't enter his mother's womb a second time. And what do you mean you could be born again?
Mhm.
And unless a man is born of the spirit and of water, you can't, taste eternal life. And so, there's this struggle of Nicodemus, this scholar, trying to understand what is Jesus saying, like he must be born again. And so that's that second, we're going to do this again. We're going to experience the suffering of beginning of our earthly life. And we're going to have that suffering of the end of that, whether it's immediate and it's a heart attack or an instant, whatever, or whether it's a protracted, illness or something. But it's then the trigger for the new life, the next life. And as Paul described, the desire to be there again, him having full confidence in that relationship and the full assurance that there was something so much more beautiful waiting for him. And that's where I'm at. And, I can't say I'm like Paul. I haven't achieved this level of I'm so desirous to leave. Um, I've got it so good here, you know. Paul had suffered probably at least 14 years by the time he's penning these letters of just unbelievable pain. Um, beatings and thrashings and lashings and, it just goes on and on and on, imprisonments. And, so to get there, yeah, he's pretty ready to go. Had his what he calls his infirmities, which he asked, God 3 times, could you take this away from me, this infirmity, this pain? And none of us really know what it is. Some scholars believe it was his eyesight. It might have been more, but the reply he got from heaven was, my grace is sufficient for you. That was a harsh, and I think that's a really beautiful thing too, because it kept him in a perpetual state of, okay, but I know there's something better, and I know that I'm going to get this new body, and I'm not going to have this infirmity of these pains or whatever he was going through specifically. It's vague for a reason, and plumb the depths. You're never going to find it out. Look, reading this black and white ink on paper, it'll be revealed to us in time, and I think that's true of a lot of things with God. Um, we have this desire to have it all answered, and part of the beauty is it's a giant mystery, some of it to me. So
Yeah, well, but it's interesting. A lot of the points that you make, I would say, is that uh, it hints at that if you pay attention to what's around you, that's enough to know what is and isn't true. And I think it was, I can't remember the original quote, but I remember it was the mathematician John Lennox who argued against Richard Dawkins and made that point that the fact that the universe is articulatable proves this this creator, the fact that it is a creation that we can logically understand and operate within, proves that there is a source or a will or something behind that. And it's interesting what you talked about with the quote from the Bible of what Nicodemus and Jesus were talking about. I seem to recall that Jesus had replied, uh paraphrasing, that that which is born of the flesh is born of the flesh, but that which is born of the spirit is of the spirit. And so that always said, and then when we talk about birth and things, it makes me think about when you have blissful ignorance, and when you kind of willfully ignore God, or ignore the spiritual reality and the spiritual nature of existence. It's sort of, yeah, like staying in this stasis and this sort of ignorance is bliss cocoon. And I've noticed that anecdotally from many people that had no contact with spirituality. And when they opened their mind up just a little bit and engaged, just like dipping their toes in the water, they got a reaction that shocked them and most of the time scared them. It scared them so much that they almost wanted to return to paradise, to stasis, to the uterus, to the womb, rather, to that blissful ignorance, that peaceful cocoon. Um, because I think, yeah, that the consequences of that, to find out that there is this truth that also we cannot tangibly in a material sense grasp. And biologically, we're so wired to really pay attention with our eyes and with our hands and all of these kind of tactile and visual things. Like we rely on that so heavily to survive that also logically, it's terrifying to know all the repercussions of that you will be judged or that there is other forces beyond what you can simply experience here. So, yeah, so I just wanted to add that point that you made and get into that. And I know that we are starting to run short on time, so I apologize for disrupting the flow of our conversation, but I'm going to switch to some more questions here. One thing I think that ties into what we've been talking about that my wife wanted to know is, you know, you had mentioned the Bible referring to God, actually speaking of things that are visual, that are intelligible, understandable to the human senses, that the Bible has claimed that God has been seen, but in different forms, in different ways, that there is these different expressions. And at the same time, when we talked about logic of the universe, you talked about, you know, almost this awareness and experience of God. And that's what I'm wondering in your case is if for yourself, has he ever revealed himself to you? Have you had a vision or have your prayers been answered in a way that is a confirmation beyond a shadow of a doubt or anything like this? Can you tell any, I mean, people particularly love those kinds of stories of truth that you had a revelation or a confirmation in some way.
Yeah. I mean, I have. And I can't say, again, you know, it's almost emotional to think about. Been so blessed to have had multiple things that left me, as we talked about the burner. Um, and I don't know why. I don't deserve those things. But I've been so blessed, Ben, to have had multiple things that left me without a shadow of a doubt. So I'm going to talk about one that's going to sound super bizarre.
Okay.
I'm not even, well, it would have been, trying to think, probably within a couple years after I'd accepted God.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I don't know what happened, Ben, but so I was driving home with Kelly from somewhere, and we're on a dirt road on the way up. We lived about a mile and a half on this dirt road on a ranch. And I said, I was just telling her, I said, you know, I'm pretty convinced that God's there. And I said, you know, I feel like I just need to accept this. And I stopped the car and I just said, I'm going to pray about it. And I asked if she wanted to join me, and I think she did. But this was my moment. And I just said that simple opening. And I said, you know, God, I think you're out there. And I'm going to put my belief in that and faith in that. And I don't know what that means, but I want to let you into my life. And if you're there, I want you to, however that sentence finished, and I can't,
Right.
what transpired after that for me, in a relatively short amount of time. And again, I don't know how long it was, but I kind of became that obnoxious person where I was like, it was so overwhelming to me that I wanted to go tell everybody. And I
Okay.
was street ministering, going under bridges, drug addicts, you know, the adult bookstore, wherever there was this depravity, like all of a sudden, like my eyes were opened to the worst of the worst. I found myself being pulled there and wanting to help people out of this desperate place. And so that was such a radical transformation that took place in me, because before that, I wouldn't have cared less about anybody sitting in those spaces. But shortly after that, I dove into this and through a series of things, and felt like I got led to a great place with. So it was probably a year after that, maybe.
Okay.
Like, really speculating. We're still living in this house on top of this mountain, and had been added onto, and there was an upper one room bedroom that had been added on above, and that was my bedroom. It wasn't at the time, but we still had that room. So I was going up there. It became my space. I like to go up there and pray. And I was on my hands and knees one day praying, and I don't know why, but I was overwhelmed with God's Spirit and ultimately his presence in that room. And so powerfully, so definitively, that I'm literally on my hands and knees, sobbing. And this is going to sound crazy, but I instantly knew that Jesus was in the room, and that if I put my hand forward 6 inches, that it would touch his foot. And I know that it was okay, but I didn't have the courage to do it. I was terrified, overwhelmed, and unworthy to put my hand on his foot. And yet so deeply grateful that the creator of the universe, the one who bore my sins, would allow me to touch his foot at that moment. And that might have been the burner experience for me. I mean, I could just fall apart thinking about it right now. Such a profound and transformative moment. And to the skeptic, they'd be like, dude, you're tripping. It doesn't matter. For me, that moment happened. I had many others that were extremely powerful, but probably nothing quite like that at that moment.
Mhm.
Um, and had I touched his foot, my whole life might have taken a different course. I don't know. Maybe. So maybe I wasn't supposed to, but just know that it was there and that he was available. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I hope that answers the question. I guess I've had a
Absolutely.
bunch, but
Absolutely.
yeah, faith's a journey, man. And the farther you go, the more you trust. So, um, to, look back through the years and in different ways he's made himself known to me. Um, I don't want people to think there's a contradiction, because the Bible says no man has seen God and lived.
Mm.
And yet countless times God's appeared to us. And so it becomes you have to then break that down, like we talked about. No scripture stands alone and by itself. So that's where we fall. We all of a sudden end up in denominations and religions and things and doubts. So obviously God has appeared to man in many, many, many ways throughout. Um, and his voice has been heard, or, thunder, but also as a still small voice, which could be the conscience. Don't know. Um, so I don't think there's anything contradictory about that, but I think God can manifest himself to anybody who's earnestly seeking him, um, or who's willing to walk in that faith or accept that gift. So I don't know.
One thing
Hopefully,
that's interesting that my co-producer Frecky says often is embrace the paradox. And he and I have had many discussions about that because the nature of paradoxes is interesting. And it's something that, again, to sort of give these arguments back to certain atheistic arguments, that on one hand, paradoxes exist in science, they exist in mathematics, and they are trackable and provable. Not to mention logical paradoxes outside of math. I mean, one of my personal favorites is, when it says everything on this piece of paper is true, and the first sentence is this sentence is a lie. And I love things like that. So even logically, you can prove paradox, and yet atheists will say that well, there's so much paradox with faith and spirituality and things, and yet they can embrace they pick and choose which paradoxes to work with. And so this is something I like that Frecky says often, embrace the paradox, all of them. Be aware of
sure.
them all. Their paradoxes exist. They are
Yeah.
an unavoidable fact. They're an inevitable fact, just like what we talked about with death. And these things, they're inevitable. And I completely understand. And these are things I've also experienced in my faith and in my spirituality that when I look at one of my favorite things is looking at etymology, and we've talked about that occasionally because I think that can reveal a lot of many different things. Not to get into all of that, but one thing I found fascinating in my faith is how there's one particular word um, that etymologically both means silence and screaming. And that's this sort of paradoxical thing that I think when you practice faith, you can understand it intuitively. You can have this relationship and this experience. And, like I've warned people about, that believing is a form of seeing. And it's not just about religion or spirituality, but that's daily life. If someone speaks sternly to you, and you decide that they're being a jerk, that's what you see, that's what you believe, so that's what you see. When maybe it's nothing personal, maybe they're stressed or whatever, and it's not even about you, and you've made it about you. So believing is seeing, whether we like it or not. And I think that goes hand in hand with spirituality. But what you talked about here is profound because um, of a lot of reasons. I think since we have no problem being more personal about in this talk between you and I want to explain to the audience, that's significant because you're not the type of person, as long as I've known you, to have that kind of unsteadiness, uncertainty, fear, or humility towards another human being. This is something different. This is, as you said, the creator of the universe is standing before you. And so this experience that you have, and someone who, like you said, you're fearless. You like to play and you like to climb up mountains and take on 20-foot waves, yet you won't extend out your hand just to touch even a toe. Um, it leads me to the question that I've heard a few times, and that's why I wanted to give that context for people. Is that's not something that's in your character. That's a very specific thing to this story that you shared. And so I wanted, I guess, two questions just so that we can keep going through my list here. Is one, you are constantly grateful and you're constantly in prayer, and I wanted to ask you if you think that there's that relationship, that having regular prayer, which would be, in your case, constant discussion and dialogue with God, is that sort of a secret to maintaining your constant gratitude that you've held out? And also, my wife was curious if you have advice on how to pray in a way that isn't selfish or vain. That goes also to the atheist argument where they say, oh, how there's nothing more arrogant than praying to the creator of the universe to find your car keys or something like that. And so if you have any thoughts on that, and any if you think that also this prayer is allows you to remain grateful, whereas other people struggle with being grateful and being conscious of what they have.
I guess I would probably break that apart. I don't think the gratitude comes from necessarily from praying for me.
Okay.
It's just um, I don't even know. I guess gratitude is just taking stock and counting your blessings, and however small they might be for some. Have such a huge basket full of blessings that it's so easy to have gratitude. Like, um, I can't even imagine not having it for everything that I've been blessed with and everything that I've been given. It should be the byproduct of that. For somebody who's, really not been blessed with everything that I've had in my life, I could see where it'd be harder to muster that, maybe. So
Mhm.
I don't want to be full of others that say they're not grateful or don't experience the gratitude. So, and maybe I'm unknowing, but maybe it is a byproduct of also being in, a pretty, not constant, but, a lot of back and forth with God. Obviously, right now, the last year, it's been a lot more than it would have been if I was like caught up in the cares of the world thing, where I was a year and a half ago running a business and,
Yeah.
you know, trying to make sure everybody's good. I think one of the toughest times of our lives for your mom and I, when, we had 6 kids going through here, and there was one period where we had 3 in college at the same time and Steph doing vocational school. We were just broke and, just trying to make ends meet and picking up whatever you could and earning extra money, and it's like so
Mhm.
easy to get from that. So prayer probably diminished at that point, instead of actually relying on God, I was probably trying to rely on myself more at that point. So I can't take credit for saying, oh, I got this incredible prayer life. It's just like right now, there's this huge reliance upon God for everything um, that I currently experience and that's coming. So it's kind of like being forced into it. That's a poor choice of words, but but it's still a blessing. And so I would just delineate between the prayer and the gratitude. The gratitude just is a choice in some weird ways to think about. It's like get up and, I mean, literally when I wake up in the mornings, it's like, hey, thank you, man. I woke up again, uh, you know, so, let's start right there.
Yeah.
Um, but sorry, what was the second part of that? It was,
The second part of that was advice to people to not pray selfishly or vain.
oh,
My wife had asked particularly, like, do
yeah,
you do you do
yeah,
you, do you keep track of that? Is that something that you're conscious of, or
yeah, yeah. It's really easy.
yeah,
Pray for others. You know, it's that damn simple. It isn't all about you. And so, you know, uh, I thank God every day. My sand writings, you guys are in them every time. I haven't been to the beach in a week now, over a week. Starting to get a little, so I have every intention of trying to get back out there and surf
you have
again. But
withdrawals from the beach?
but I mean, whether I ever make it back there or not, it's irrelevant. What I do have to do is pray for others, and I mean, it's that simple, Ben. If you do, I have needs. Well, do I have wants? Let's start. Yeah, of course I have some wants. Do I have needs? Probably not. Um, I really don't have needs at this point. It's kind of letting go of that. So to not be selfish is to put everybody in front of you. Um, the greatest commandment is to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second greatest is to love your neighbor as yourself. You know, so uh, love God. That's first and foremost, and then like pray for everybody else, man. I know so many people that are going through such terrible things and they don't have what I have. They haven't accepted that blessing yet. So, man, I just hope they find that. That's the thing. I pray for you guys. And I say you guys, all my kids. Like the first thing is thank you for Jean. Every morning, I'm so grateful for her. But I also pray for her. Second, before I even start on anything else, I'm praying for her strength, praying that she continues to rely on God for this and not her own stuff. I pray for her that it's not overwhelming for her, that she's not overburdened by sadness or, anything. And then, that second prayer is that for, it's you guys, and I would say you guys, my kids and their spouses and loved, the ones that are close to them. So husbands and wives, and then the grandkids. And that's very, very, very specific. And it has been for, since you guys were children, since we became a family. And that's that you guys will all, to use a cliche word, but be saved. I hope you all experience what I've been blessed with, and that's God's salvation. Beyond that, I pray for everybody's well-being and, their protection and stuff. But so that is such a simple part of that. Do I pray for myself at some point? I pray that I stay the course. I pray that I stay strong. I pray that God continues to not let my faith diminish, or when I'm confronted with the most vile part of the body failing, that I won't get weak. Really, that's it. I mean, I just am praying for that continued strength. I want to see this thing through and end up, in God's eternity. And so, in terms of advice, I'm not going to pray for to find my car keys. It's pretty much irrelevant. If I don't find the keys, then I'm not going.
Yeah.
And there must be a reason,
Right.
or my own stupidity for not putting them something that I would find them. So, like the trivial, I don't really worry about now, but I don't. And I guess that goes back to that religious thing, Ben. If your prayers are so shallow, they're all about yourself. We got a problem. Got a big problem. If you can pray for the strength to just say, like, God, I'm going to take this in faith. That's about you. But again, that's like, that submission. It's a submission. It's letting go of the ego. It's letting go of the pride. It's letting go of I'm in control. Very difficult thing to do for somebody. I only know from a male perspective, but we're built and wired in a certain way. And, you said, oh, you don't have that much fear. I think I have fear. It's, I know I've been confronted with that many times, but it's also there's some joy in confronting that fear for me, maybe in a weird way. So it's drawn me to things that I can't control. But that runs completely counter to where I have to be with God, because I can't use that same, I'm going to get myself out of this, or I'm going to conquer it, or I'm going to push myself through it. It doesn't work that way with spirituality. It doesn't work that way with God. If anything, we're stripped of that, and we're naked, before him in that way. And so, when I can't say I don't pray for myself, but when I do, it's just, God, please continue. Give me the strength to see this thing through. And it's been an incredible journey, and I don't want to fail at the end. Not that I don't think he'd ever let me get there. I don't think that's not his nature, right? We're going to reach out as a loving entity. I got you.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, there's that really cool about the footprints in the sand. It's I don't know what you call it. It's a greeting card kind of thing, but it's the guy gets to heaven and he's like, Jesus, when I look back at my life, I saw that you were walking with me, and your footprints were next to mine in the sand. And then in the most difficult times in my life, there was only one set of footprints. You abandoned me. You let me go through these things alone. Why would you do that? And Jesus said, I didn't abandon you. That's when I was carrying you. So, that's where I'm at. If I need to be carried, carry me.
Yeah.
I could. Okay. Love you. But so there you go. It's like, we don't know. And I don't know. But I do know that if I'm weak, then he's strong.
Yeah.
I can't do it, then he can. If I'm afraid, then he's not. And those are those things that I'm going to get fed. And, that's burned into my soul. I know that's going to happen. So super grateful for that, super grateful. But, I hope they become, or they're valid explanations. They won't be to the natural mind, but if people will open their heart, maybe they will be, and I hope for Tia. I'm so excited that, and I have been since, for the last 6 or 7 months when you first mentioned this for her. Because I remember back, going through this phase of leading up to that, pulling the car over and just stopping in my tracks. There was a build up to that and a breakdown to that. And I went through a lot of struggles, which were perfect. If you don't get chopped down, you're going to think that you can do it on your own and pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, the old adage, or religion's a crutch.
The opiate of the masses.
Yeah, right. Was it Stalin?
Marx.
Karl Marx said that. And, it's like, yeah, what a lie. What
I
a
agree.
What a deception. So
I would argue that matter would be. I think the material could be a bit more. I mean, not to mention material opium, literal opium is more. But yeah, I definitely would argue the other perspective. And for the audience, for people that don't know, my co-producer and I sat down together to introduce this channel and discuss why we were doing it. We were both a bit exhausted after many days of filming, so we will for sure do that again. But we discussed our view on spirit and material, and yeah, it's and so I'll reiterate again. I think that the opposite's true. I think that there's a spiritual foundation that the material wouldn't exist without. And whether you believe that as, the scientist Donald Hoffman points out that everything is consciousness and conscious agents, and that reality is sort of like the interface. Like when you go onto a computer desktop and there's a little blue folder, there's not actually a little blue folder. That's just
No.
an emblem of what of what you
Yeah.
can do with that or what it symbolizes, but that's not
Yeah.
what it is. And that is the same, essentially how reality functions. And I would align with that. Or you can look at this from a Christian or even Hermetic perspective, that reality was made from the raw, chaotic material of a creator force. Even if you want to say that that's the Big Bang or whatever, but it had to come from somewhere, and that is the foundation of reality. And that so I would say that it's the opposite is true, that the material is the opiate of the masses. And that's a large reason why this channel exists, is to wake people up and snap them out of their opiatic stupor.
Yeah.
So because I'm running low on battery and we both are running low on time, and I would much rather wrap things up with you with these questions than give like a formal, hey, goodbye, like, share, subscribe, comment, blah, 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 YouTuber stuff. I'm just going to give you these 3 questions, and you can answer them as long as you need. No rush. But I'm going to give them all 3 of them to you. Firstly, this one's for me. I'm really curious, given exactly what I just said about um, the nature of material and spiritual and the perspective that people have, and that secularism and atheism um, is a large force in the world nowadays. What do you think that Christians, and I know that that's a general term, I know there's different, so keeping that in mind, not all Christians are the same, but what do you think Christians, or maybe let's say spiritual people, can do better in the modern world, or in public discourse to um, to maybe guide people away from sin, or at least steer them into a spiritual or moral perspective. If we leave behind the Christian concept of sin, but you know, at the very least, move things along spiritually. So that's my first question. Um, Secondly, I know that you have a fascinating book collection that has helped you immensely on your journey. And so I was hoping you could give us that book list that you'd recommend to other seekers. And then finally, I just wanted to offer you the opportunity to address the audience personally, not just me, but everybody watching. If you have anything that you would like to say to them, no matter what. And those are my three for you, the final three.
Okay. The first one was about what can Christians do better, and that's a really difficult thing to answer, Ben. I think the world sees most Christians as pretty shallow, and um, the Bible says the fruit of the Spirit,
Mm-hmm.
which I would interpret that as the proof of that you're really existing, and it lists all these things, meekness and temperance and love and charity, and these things, and um, they're the byproducts of a spirit-led and filled life. And I don't
Right.
know that that's evident. It is, but it's not as prevalent as it should be. And I think that um, this goes back to what I touched on at the end of the last thing. I'm not convinced we're doing it right. And by that, I just mean that we have these big buildings and these edifices that we visit once a week. Maybe we go during the week, we go meet with some other Christians at a Bible study, and none of that's wrong. But I just don't see it's an inreach, not an outreach.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, let's just focus on the United States. We're supposedly a Christian nation, and we were founded upon these principles. And if you go back to the inception, from what I know historically, all the hospitals, all the universities, all these things were done by what we would call the church, churches, various denominations or whatever. But all the higher learning, all the acts of mercy, um, they weren't done by government agencies, and they weren't done by nonprofits. And so what we've seen is an erosion over, in my opinion, of what Christianity should be, into this weird, we go there,
Mm-hmm.
we work, and then we go back to our thing. And what have we done for humanity around us? What have we done for, um, I believe, again, I've paraphrased all this, but pure, unadulterated religion, I think, as Paul said, is taking care of the widows and the orphans and visiting those that are sick and taking care of the prisoner. Or, there's these basic, like, it isn't that hard. Do we do any of that? And there are people who do, and there are, to use the word Christian, and it's a tough one, it's a broad brush, but there are people, let's say followers or believers, that are doing all of those things. And they're reaping the benefits, and the benefactors from those visits and being ministered to are reaping those benefits. But as a collective whole, the church in the United States is a massive failure, almost a deception to me. And that's why I look at, like, so when you asked about books, I'm going to jump ahead to that.
Mm-hmm.
One book specifically comes to mind, and it's the most depressing thing you'll ever read. But it's also enlightening in this sense. It's called Fox's Book of Martyrs. And it's a historical journey through the ages of primarily religious persecution. it's an indictment on religion, Christianity and Catholicism, butchering people who don't ascribe to their particular denomination.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's a, like I said, it's a horrific thing to read, and it could be super depressing for somebody. But at the same time, it's also super impactful, and it's a warning to avert following that religiosity. Um, I can go and look in that bookshelf and find some other things that have been really, really um, good to read.
Well, then we'll just say it like this. You can let me know, and I will be sure to post on all of our social media platforms. Links down in the description. Take a look at our social media stuff, and you'll find Blake's
Okay.
book list
Yeah.
of important reads.
Yeah. So now go back to the middle question. Sorry, I jumped from first to third.
No. The book list was the second question. The first one was, what can spiritual people do in modern times and in the public
Right.
discourse to either lead people away from sin or closer to spirituality of some form? And the final question is, what would you like to say to the viewers, to everybody watching or everybody that'll potentially watch this talk? What do you want to say to them directly about your life, yourself, your belief, anything?
So let's go back to the first question. I did want to add one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's very, very simple in terms of what people can do. Treat people the way you want to be treated. And that second commandment was love your neighbor as yourself. So if people were doing that as believers, as followers, and I believe that true followers are, I don't believe the religious are. And that's what I wanted to make that distinction. So
I see.
that's,
Yeah.
so, and I believe if you go to countries where there's persecution, you'll find the deepest faith, unshakable, unquestionable faith, where there's people being martyred, where there's people being persecuted, where there's people being imprisoned. You'll find the deepest and greatest faith.
Yeah.
So then from what do I want to say? What do I hope somebody gets out of this? If there's anything, I hope they get out of it. And none of it's, like I said, I've already shared that I've been blessed beyond anything anybody ever deserves. So I have no hope for that in and of anything personally. But what I do hope for this is that even if only one person watches your channel and pulls their car over or stops in their tracks at some point or gets pressed into a situation where they recognize they aren't going to be able to solve it themselves and that death is imminent. Once we're confronted by these truths of what you talked about, mathematics and physics and all the laws of science and what I call intelligent design, Lennox would call mathematics or those things. Once you get to that place, if this can have any influence on, just stop the damn car. Just stop in your tracks. Just pull over for a minute. Just get on your, whatever it is. I hope this inspires one person to do that. And I hope that it becomes a tool that people can see themselves in my situation, and they're going to know that they're going to have that same situation. We're not going to run from this, and view it as exactly what it's been for me, an opening and a blessing to gratitude and to a deeper walk with my Savior, who I hope becomes their Savior. That's my hope. So,
All right. Well,
yeah.
then we will leave it there. It sorry. It would be nice to try and do this again for a part 3, but obviously there's no promises, and I think the next time you and I chat, it'd probably be between you and me, for
Okay.
just just
Open
for,
to it.
yeah,
Open.
whichever. But thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
taking the time. I sensed that and felt that and heard these changes. It's like I said to you before. I mean, I've always been aware, and then at some points amazed, and at other points awed by your faith and your connection and your unique perspective. And since this diagnosis and the way that things have been going, I've been absolutely stunned with how you adapt and how you still, yeah. Well, I guess you would say that, Christ is sailing the ship, not you. I was about to say you're sailing. It's amazing how you're sailing your own ship, but I remembered the
I
footprints
was
on the
about
beach.
to expect, but you
Yeah.
just did it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
I'm the recipient. I'm just a
yeah,
recipient. Yeah. So it isn't fortitude or willpower or inner strength. It's the actual opposite. It's
yeah,
through made strong. So such a
yeah,
blessing to be.
yeah.
So
Well, thank you again for doing this. I hope that your wish comes true. And for me, I just yeah, I hope that talks like this just at least all I ask is at least think about it. You know,
yeah,
um, as I've said in many different videos, and I'm sure I will say in many more videos to come, there's no harm in as you said, just pull the car over, just stop, just think about it.
yeah,
And I hope that this conversation um, does exactly that. So thank you,
yeah.
and yeah, and maybe we can do this again.
All right. I'm totally open if
All
it
right,
works out.
all right. Well, thank you everybody who watched to this point, and we'll see you in the next video.
Right on. Love you.
Love you too. Bye.